Hello there, everyone, and welcome to another lore ramble. This was a completely fair election. I did not intervene at all whatsoever. No, I totally fucking did. Name's Adam.
I'm Imsit.
Yeah, I kind of nudged things a little bit on the Discord polls. A lot of you in the initial voting were kind of interested in Infinite Worlds for GURPS. And don't get me wrong, I could easily talk quite a bit about it just because it does a lot of alternate history stuff. The problem is it also dabbles about with multiversal theory, and I'm kind of sick and tired of multiverse writing. It was novel and creative and unique initially, but modern entertainment has kind of turned it into poison, massive amounts of rat poison. So, after mentioning that and clearly being a massive fucking fraud, hello there, Dark Sun, we decided let's take a look instead at good old fashioned imperialism. Welcome to Game Designer Workshop's Space 1889, the original,
We
made in the 80s.
we get to do colonialism without the guilt.
By the way, that's supposed to be based on a British uniform. I don't know why they decided to make it blue because that traditionally is the French uniform costume. You see the Batmen of Mars, which is pretty great. Oh, you can even see the canals in the background. And look, you can see an early, I think that's based on a very early ironclad that's floating in the air. Oh no, that's American. I think that's an American. Okay then. It opens up with a little map of Mars because the base setting for Space 1889 is on Mars because Mars is the red planet. It's the one that was very much obsessed over by old timey sci-fi adventure people. Because well, what happened was an Italian astronomer said he saw what he meant to say canyons on Mars because he saw the what was it, the Valles Marineris, the large canyons of Mars. It was translated as canals. So for quite a while there was belief that it might have been actually inhabited, and they just kind of play with that. Shows the several faces of Mars.
I mean, we do know now that there is frozen water on the planet.
Oh yeah, there's a decent amount of frozen water on Mars. There's also a very limited atmosphere, and there were a couple times that we thought we actually detected trace microbial life or at least fossilized life.
There's
Uh,
always a chance.
yeah, we've not confirmed that. In terms of life in the solar system, I think your best bets are you're gonna probably find them in Europa, maybe Ganymede or one of the other Galilean moons, just because of tidal working. And then from there, maybe Titan, because you can get some interesting silicon-based life forms, hypothetically. Hypothetically,
But
we don't know any. They're not, we don't.
actually, technically, don't we have life on the moon? Like, I mean, the bacteria or whatever that came from Earth.
Yes and no. We actually have life on Venus now. It's
Wait, really?
because the upper atmosphere of Venus is actually relatively habitable. It doesn't get too hot, doesn't get too cold. And as long as they can survive the trace amounts of sulfuric acid, they're doing fine. We accidentally contaminated Venus, and they're just vibing up there in the upper atmosphere.
But we know that for a fact.
Yes, we've actually gotten documented samples of bacteria that survived on Venus. Native to our planet, but it just got transported over, I think, from Russian experiments because Russia was very not invented, invested. Russia was very committed to Venus missions, basically trying to beat us to that rather than Mars. Much to their
I,
mistakes because of how much of a
they,
pain in the ass it is to get on Venus.
they already think because it's the red planet, it was already Soviet.
Maybe I think the logic was the U.S. was investing so hard in Mars, they were going to try to beat them on Venus because it was harder to detect anything on the surface because of its thick cloud cover. But yeah, Space 1889 by Games Designer Workshop. To give you an idea, this game was very popular back when it was first came out, to the point where it's actually in the top 50 for probably most played systems of all time. It had a very large book collection. It has entire setting portfolios for Mercury and Venus as well as Mars. I think there's stuff to do on Earth as well. I know
Why would
they've
you want to do that?
seriously expanded some stuff. Like there's a lot of shit you can do. And it actually became so popular. It had a very successful kind of computer game. So here's a bit of the initial art of to get you right into the mindset. I very much like how they seem to have used colored markers to color them in. Kind of adds a bit of charm to it. So as for required equipment, the book is pretty much all you really need. You do need six-sided dice because this is a D6 system. It's one of the few faults I'll give this edition. They're not very blatant about what type of dice system you're supposed to use. We kind of had to retro figure it out because we were skimming. Uh, dice do what they usually do. They have an entire note on gender because, well,
It's the Victorian age.
this is
They
also
didn't.
based on Adventure Pulp. This is the works of John Edgar Rice Burroughs. This is the work of Ron Howard. And a lot of those works, they're kind of damsels in distress. And in this case, they're just pointing out you don't have to go full masculino. There's a lot of action babes, especially since this is after Indiana Jones, where you had people like Marion Ravenwood as a character. Deliberately contaminate all lifeless rocks in our system. Completely agree, Squirrel Killer. Fuck pristine nature. And they go into details about, well, the introduction. So, the world of space 1889 is essentially the late stage of the Victorian era. There's a lot of upheaval during this period of time, and in this setting, even more so, because you have to add in space flight, and this is during the age of imperialism. They point out that even with the advances in space flight and travel, technology is about on par. Electricity is known and utilized, but residential electrification is slow to happen. It was just starting to happen. This is during the period of gas lights. To give you an idea, the light bulb at this point only had a lifespan of something like 72 hours. Like 1889 was
Continu
when the light bulb only lasted a couple days
continuous, and but I
of
assume you can
continuous
turn it
light.
off, right?
Yeah, you're supposed to turn
You
it
turn
off
it off,
because
or
it's supposed to be like during night. Gas
I'm gonna
lights
be honest.
lasted longer. They also came up with the interesting concept of moon lamps. If you're wondering, moon lamps are these horrific radio tower sized structures that have giant fuck off lights because they could last longer. And they were supposed to at least be as bright as the moon. At this
Also,
point, coal is still king. Most of their
but
boilers are steam. There's not really diesel.
question, is this the era where we're starting to just use nuclear stuff for everything? Like we're
Well,
just
because this is
starting to
based
use
on
it, and
adventure pulp, particularly Barsoom, they do play around a little bit with atomic power. This is just when glowy things were discovered, so they know about the powers and potentials of irradiation. They don't really know about the negative side effects of it.
so we can start eating those glowing chips.
Radium chips. They're going to be so good. This is also just when diesel was invented. Like, the internal combustion engine just came about.
Apparently also, well, one of the big differences is flight. Basically, steam flying vehicles.
Which, to give you an idea, flying machines were dabbled with for a long time. The very first flight actually occurred during Revolutionary period France, because hot air balloons have been a thing since, well, the late 1790s. So technically, you
And
could probably make some form of air-powered aerostat. To give you an idea, for the longest of time, there was a German lord known as Lord Zeppelin who kept wanting to build these types of things. He had to invest it personally himself, and he went bankrupt twice, I think, before he got enough funding to build a Zeppelin.
and then Hindenburg happened.
Oh no, that was like 30 years from then.
Well, that's about all of the Zeppelins I know of,
Also, you're supposed to use
except
helium.
except for the lead one.
But yeah, flight is a big thing. Apparently,
They also,
Thomas Edison went to Mars and stole the invention for what's called Liftwood.
yeah, no, it's apparently a product of a tree that grows in the Martian highlands. So yeah, that's why the colonialism's happening, because that's the only way we can get stuff to fly.
Yeah, Liftwood is this kind of settings version of unobtainium. If we're going to use the Avatar, the Blue People movie concept, it is it is a negatively buoyant. No, it's a positively buoyant wood that, when processed, actually is lighter than air. And that sounds stupid, but if you're a fan of the Barsoom series like I am, that's not the dumbest thing you could ever do. Because Barsoom, do you want to know how they fly in Barsoom when they make their battleships and stuff?
I thought it was like, I don't know, some resource, or it's just psychics.
Oh no. No. Okay, so there are actually two more colors of light on the electromagnetic spectrum that are visible to human eyes. The Martians were able to essentially capture them via prism and prism technology. There is the eighth color of light, which is known as the buoyant force. It is the propulsive element of light, which you can store, and it allows you to make anti-gravity devices.
It's light-based energy.
It is you know how light propagates and moves in a wave? It is the motion particles of light itself. That is a color. As for the ninth color, they only talk about it because it's the magical bullshit that allows Mars to fix its atmosphere. Basically, Mars's
Oh,
atmosphere is thinning out. You use the ninth color of light. You use some weird electro process, and it turns it into oxygen. I think it requires ice from the poles to do.
is there another light that explains why they're all naked in that book series?
Uh, it's because it gets really fucking hot during the day. Basically, it's similar in temperature intensity to Arizona. So it gets to like 100 degrees real hot, and then it drops to like around freezing at night.
It still doesn't explain why they'd be naked throughout the entire
Oh, they're not
day.
naked. They wear harnesses, and they at least cover their modesty a little bit.
I mean, basically, it's just the excuse to have,
You need to show skin. Frank Frazetta needs
yeah.
to show skin.
So, continuing on, they say that interplanetary transportation takes about a month between worlds. Ships do not carry enough oxygen for continuous burning of coal for several weeks. So they use solar boiler-powered ship.
Yep,
However, they're
solar
not able
boiler
to
powered
explore
ships.
the asteroid belt. Alexander Graham Bell still makes the telephone. However, most long-range transportation is by telegraph and the transatlantic cable.
Yep,
Radio has not been invented yet.
telegraphs were a thing since I believe the 1830s, so it makes sense.
So instead of using, I forget whatever the telegraph uses for its radio waves, they use light from the sun.
Oh, heliographs are a real thing. This isn't some sci-fi invention. Heliographs were a thing in military signaling during the 19th century.
Oh,
I think it was actually pioneered during the Napoleonic Wars. Basically, it was a way
oh,
to replace flag signaling. It became very popular with the Navy for a reason. Until they realized, wait, weather inclement means you can't see it. We gotta get the fucking flags back. These are
weaponry.
sci-fi solar heliographs though, because you make big fuck off lenses.
Uh, guns, still the same.
There's not really much
We're,
that would change too much.
we're about 30 years away before all this being used to commit horrible amounts of murder.
Well, not really. The machine gun was invented during the Civil War equivalent,
Yeah, but
and by this
you didn't have.
point, there's a variety of heavy machine guns.
I guarantee you World War One's going to be breaking out sooner than we expect.
Oh, I want to see the Battle of Lagrange 3 where everyone dies horribly, and the orbital junk creates a Kessler syndrome around the Earth.
I'm pretty much expecting the French, their initial plan is to just throw their men out into space.
Uh, he's not joking, by the way. The French were very much in the school of Elan, conquers all. Basically, they very much favored aggressive assaults. To give you an idea, this is the time period where they were starting to change their uniforms, like the 1880s to 1890s. Not quite. It's kind of in the aftermath of the First Boer War that the British actually changed their uniforms from the red. Even then, they had a bit of a fight from more traditionalists who were like, "Oh, it's a bloody traditional uniform we've had for like 200 years." But ultimately, I think it was the Second Boer War that forced them to change it. The French legitimately refused to. It took World War One to fucking do it.
And here's why. Because during the beginning of the war, they decided, here's how we're going to fight the German trenches. We're going to be in our brightly colored uniforms and march directly in front of the machine guns. I believe it was the most amount of men dead in a single day when they did
At
that.
least until the Somme, yes. It beat all records until mid to late 1916 with Verdun. If you're wondering why
Um,
the French were so stubborn, what would happen is you would have some conservative politician or some weird advocate scream, "But the red pants are traditional," and then throw a fit, and then the French Congress would reject it. They actually had three uniform design competitions in 1904, 1908, and 1912. And every time the soldiers actually no, the soldiers I think did not like the second competition. They didn't like the weird green uniform. It made them look too Italian or something, if I recall correctly. But
I
they
mean,
liked the first and third one.
you could have just said it's because they were French.
But yeah, this is during the period of the Berlin Congress consensus kind of falling apart. The balance of power is collapsing. Belgium by this point has committed horrendous fucking things, and they
Yeah,
mention them.
the Congo Free State still exists. So, fuck.
Oh no, it gets worse because there's the Congo Free State on Mars, the Capredes Free State. They got a big chunk of Mars.
And it's still owned by the king, isn't it?
I think the Congo isn't. Maybe Caprates still is. Oh, also since this is the 1880s, 1889s, you're going to see some interesting. I don't know if they play with it in this book. Probably not, since this is the adventure pulpy book. But unironically, if you wanted to do like an early socialist revolutionary book or like an anarchist insurrection book, this is also the time period to play around with because there's a fuckload of ideologies at this point.
Oh yeah.
So
Um,
we're going to be quick about character sheets. You have stats ranging from 1 to 6, 1 being the absolute lowest, 6 being the best. This determines your dice pool. This ultimately determines your dice pool. You roll a bunch of d6s, and you have to beat the target number. That is how it works, and they go into the variety of attributes. I think in this one I want to show the social level because the last time I saw something like that was in Traveler. They do chart your social level, ranging from aristocracy to working class. So you can be the upper crust, or you could be one of the filthy poors, the disgusting hoi polloi, fit only to mine coal in West Virginia and die.
I mean, yeah, at this point, class is a very strong element of your background.
Well, this
There's
is
not that
Gilded
much
Age.
social mobility.
This is the Gilded Age. This is when the haves literally have and the have-nots have not at all. This is around the time that wealth inequality at this point is so bad. You had millionaires repeatedly going, "Holy shit, this is horrible," like Andrew Carnegie.
Squirrel was asking those if it's sum of pool for the dice pool or the number of successes. I believe it's the sum.
Okay, so they give you a target number, and the trick is you have to get the target number collectively from the pool, from what I understand. Now, we
Yeah.
kind of skimmed through, and I'm a little more familiar with the more modern system, which is very different. But besides that, you have a bunch of skills. I love how their version of martial arts is just called fisticuffs.
Wonder why they didn't call it pugilism.
They should have. That would have been great.
Although that's a that's a specific form of fighting, I think.
Probably. There's also what's called Cascade Skills. The Cascade Skills, basically, you can go down here, and what it allows you to do is it allows you to specialize. These are your specialties. I just wanted to show this off because they go right into it. They give you good ideas on how this sort of stuff works. They also then give you careers you can pick, which, by the way, I mentioned that Space 1889 has a computer game. The computer game pretty much works like this. If I recall correctly, it works very much like how this game works, which I think is pretty neat.
So it's a direct translation.
Uh, they might have arbitrated some in favor of making it more playable in terms of coding, but I very clearly remember that this was a thing for the computer game. I've not actually played it. I've only seen footage of it, but I vaguely remember. And what careers do is they allow you to have certain amounts of wealth, which are based on your societal class. Wait, hold up. You saw Witchcraft? Yes, Dark Sun, that's a thing. That is an actual ability you can pick up is Witchcraft. And the reason why is this is pulp adventure, baby. So you're going to have to run into all sorts of weird cults and ritualistic beliefs and witch doctors. So if you want to know the dark arts, you can easily pick up the dark arts. Now, does that actually mean magic counts? Not really.
Oh, I thought this was like more like that spiritualism that you had in the Victorian
They're
era.
more like mystics or channelers, yes.
Not exactly the same thing as.
There's a little bit of spoopiness, there's a little bit of magery, but it's not a lot. It's not a lot. By the way, if you have a social level of 6, you have a servant. So you could be the most rude and crude guy, but if you have a social of 6, you will still have an Mboombo to hand you an elephant gun.
It's either in Boom Boo or
Or the butler, the Alfred.
yeah.
You also have income because that's a thing. So also they mentioned that if you're an inventor, you may have inventions. So some of the options you got are government careers, which actually go into details about regimental regiments. So you could maybe make a Space 1889 minis game out of this, maybe.
I think they did make miniatures.
They probably did. Or at the very least, you can appropriate the miniatures from it because there was a lot of miniatures wargaming that wasn't just like straight up Warhammer Fantasy at this time because this is a different era back then. This is back when minis gaming was a lot more fucking hardcore. It still is,
What
but
year? What year would this have been made?
the mid to late 80s.
Oh no, that's Metal Games Workshop.
Yeah, but this is like right when fantasy was really kicking off. Like this is after they kind of stapled together and decided they were focusing on minis gaming rather than the weird hybrid
RPG.
between that and tabletopping that they used to do.
We
Alfred,
have
put
to
on the
review
tea and
the.
prepare my rocket. I wish to hunt the space narwhal. And that's another thing. There's entire books just based on adventures in the aether because instead of space, it's aether. It is the hypothetical state beyond gas that used to be believed to be up there. So, unironically, if you want to do an entire Captain's Courageous where you hunt whales in space, why the hell not? Oh, and if you're wondering, yep, there's the army. Other options include you can be a diplomat. Colonial offices are real careers that you can have. You can also be a big game hunter, an adventurous, which is for women. Reporters. You can be an actor. You could be groundkeeper Willie. You could be groundskeeper Willie from The Simpsons.
You know what I realized with this? Technically, you could use this and reenact, or at least bring in elements from the book A True Story. You know, that Greek or no, it was Roman, the Roman sci-fi story about a guy going into space Poking fun at all the sort of travel guides of the time.
Yeah, you totally could. By the way, it is Aether, spelled with an A in this case. They go into detail about the press. So the thing is, the Victorian era was a big advancement in literacy. Massive literacy campaigns occurred throughout the reign of Queen Victoria, and this was kind of a universal thing in the Western world. In England specifically, they had the Education Act of 1870, which really caused a mass acceleration of the desire to read. Um, there was a variety of newspapers that was to give you information, but honestly, it was also the source for salacious gossip, a lot of rags. This is also the period where the penny dreadful became very popular, especially since as books became more and more produced, there were ways to make them cheaper. Journalism at this period was at its most influential and powerful just because it took forever for news to be disseminated. So you actually had a long wait time between events. This is also why wars tended to get a lot bloodier because you didn't have 24-hour instant coverage over all of the people getting destroyed. They also go into some examples of pretty famous journalists like Archibald Forbes, the guy who would eventually found the journal Forbes. He legitimately was a actual eyewitness reporter during the Zulu Wars.
And
Yeah, a lot
such
of old school
beloved,
RPGs were very pulpy, and that really helps.
don't forget also some beloved learning institutions such as the Daily Mail.
Yep, that was founded at this time period. Most well known for a variety of horrible things, like "Hooray for the Black Shirts" and mocking the deaths of hundreds of Argentinians who begged surrender as their ship got blown up. Very,
Oh, wait,
very classy newspaper. Oh wait,
there is an
no, I'm
anar
confusing it with the Sun. Sorry, they're both trash.
there is an anarchist class.
Ah, hell yeah, here we go.
You get plus five. You get a five for agility. Get -3 to your social. One to
Because you're supposed to be
explosives.
insane, and you're a criminal.
Remember, these are the guys that end up shooting and killing a president.
They also kill a king, although he was so hated, it probably helped the Italian monarchy to die. By the way, if you're wondering, sos means your social standing. It's not your sociability.
Oh,
So the highest you're going to get is middle class because traditionally, this is kind of horseshit because there were a lot of highly well-off people who joined socialist and anarchist circles. Um,
well, anarchism would be different from the socialism,
Oh
I'd
no, no, it
assume.
isn't. It actually isn't at all. This is before they were. This is only relatively recently after they got kicked out of the Internationale. Anarchism and socialism go hand in hand because anarchism at its core criticizes capitalism in the same way. They just disagree with Marx. They reject some of the key pinnings of Marxism. Instead, they
Right.
advocate for socialism in general. Almost all anarchists are of a socialist point of view. There are ones that are not. Primarily, the individualist anarchism kind of spins all the way into a fucked up form of libertarianism. But at the end of the day, I can understand why they did it because this does kind of negatively impact your societal standing because this is the period where they're known for doing what's called the action of the deed, i.e., causing a lot of damage, be it sabotaging
Terrorism
a factory or actual acts of terrorism. Yes.
and murder.
Same with thieves, by the way. Since you're known as a thief, you can't really be trusted. Poachers are seen as blackguards because there's a certain thing. I like how merchants actually severely destroy your societal standing. I like how it's actually even harsher if you look at it. It's even harsher than anarchists.
Uh, Are they implying something?
Maybe we could be fucking up and actually not understanding the what the negative means. Maybe it's like you have to be under. That could be what it is. While scientists, you have to have a societal rating above 4. Maybe that's the concept. Maybe it's not a negative. It's what you have to have requirement wise.
Well, no, it says because there's initiative or intelligence.
Let me look.
Hmm.
Just as a quick career paths. Do they actually explain what it means? They probably do, but for sake of time, we're not going to go into it, sadly, which is a bit depressing. You know,
Onto the Vic.
oh, go on.
We're on. We're gonna go ahead or go back.
No, we can skip past the skills. I think we can just cover Victorian. You were right.
Yeah. So this is the Victorian era. Uh, Queen Empress Victoria is celebrating her 50th anniversary of her rule.
Hmm.
Um, Saying confident, comfortable, vigorous, perhaps a little heavy around the jowls. The British Empire was growing.
Because the
They were
British at
fight.
this point were usually represented by, there were two major representatives. There was John Bull, the portly man with the powerful mutton chops. That is their version of country representation during this time period. It's similar to how the U.S. was well known for either Uncle Sam or Lady Liberty, depending on how you depicted her. This is all. It's also known for the bulldog because the English bulldog very much became a representation of the United Kingdom.
Currently, they're fighting in Sikkim, Sierra Leone, and Nyasaland in Africa, Lucia in Asia, Syrtis Major on Mars.
So, if you're
So,
wondering, Sikkim was a kingdom in India. They were left mostly alone during the initial expansions because they're in the same region that Bhutan and Nepal were, and they were seen as relatively marginal. There is a minor expansionistic war during this period in time. Sierra Leone, not really. That was their version of the repatriating slaves back to Africa concept. There might have been an expansion effort in the territories to try to cut off the French, but that would be about it because this is before Fashoda. This is before Fashoda and the rationalization of l'Entente. Nyasaland, I believe, actually is connecting. That was their attempt to connect to their holdings. That was an attempt to essentially connect to their holdings in North Africa because by this point they puppeted Egypt. Uh, Lushai refers to specifically them trying to carve up Siam, and Mars is, well, fictional.
so yeah, so colonialism still happens in this world. It's not just relegated to space.
Also,
Oh,
also the crown by
space.
this point already kind of took control over Burma, but at this point they just kind of gave up on all pretenses of even setting up a princely state. Bechuanaland was kind of controlled for a while. Oh wait, no, they weren't because they were in a pissing match with the South African Republic, not South African Republic, Transvaal Republic, and the Orange Free State, which were Voortrekker republics, aka the Dutch.
So
Well, Afrikaner, I should say.
and basically it's 1889, but we're in space as well, which again means oh, the world of 1989 in this universe is going to be a fucking trip.
Oh, decolonization is going to be a complete shit show.
Oh, I'm thinking of decolonization with Martian tripods and lasers.
No, it's Martian versions of the AK-47. Just see bat creatures wielding AK-47s, throwing Molotov cocktails into into British colonial offices. And since Edison and Armstrong had plummeted to the atmosphere of Mars 19 years before, there was an area and two planets in which the sun is said to never set. See, yeah, the United Kingdom basically early on got deep into Martian colonization. It is ridiculously huge in this timeline.
I mean, you don't really have, I'd say, much resistance. You
They
also
also
don't,
they also go slightly into a brief history period of how the United Kingdom came about, but like whatever.
and they do also kind of explain, I guess, the tendency of not to- how Britain is in the world at this time. I don't know how accurate it is, but it does seem to be more of a setting of like what was it in the real world than in this fictional
Oh
universe.
no, they explain it pretty well. So the British, here's the thing, the British. They kind of got their empire due to just slow greed in trade agreements. They were a mercantile nation, they preferred trade, and what would ultimately happen is they would intervene to protect their trade, which ultimately would land in them creating puppet kings and taking land. Their whole thing was focusing on profit. They're not really expansionistic. They weren't. This is opposed to the French policy, which was to, after losing their colonial empire in North America, basically they were very much obsessed with their prestige. That's why they focused so hard on unifying West Africa.
I mean, you do have still the like Cecil Rhodes and Chamberlain and the concept of the white man's burden, but
That is a thing, but with the British, it usually started as trade desire. Then it was we have to educate these savages. And even then, at the core of it, it's still ultimately just we need to make money, and also our business was threatened. That means we now can annex this entire country.
and now within the I guess conflict of world powers, I mean you had France, you have the Russians, and now because it's the late 1800s, Germany.
Uh, 1889, not yet, not yet. So okay, in terms of interrelationship squabbling, since this is Space 1889, at this point, the United Kingdom is partially opposed to France. They're more willing to talk with them, but they are still rivals. This is actually during the period where they almost went to war twice. In fact, they did. In fact, they even mentioned Fashoda, which this was a big pissing match over some stretch of land in Africa. World War One almost happened entirely because of this. As for Russia, they mentioned the Great Game. Basically, Russia was obsessed with a warm water port. The United Kingdom very much did not want them to ever get one, because they were always terrified at the concept of the Russian Black Seas fleet or the Russian fleet strangling British trade. They were always terrified of this. And as for Germany, this is they're kind of overselling this, but at this point, yes, Kaiser Noodle Arm just got on there, and he's a big man child who's constantly talking about building up the navy and occasionally saying "fuck the UK." But this
And
is
they would have beaten France at this time.
they beat France like 20 years ago, but at that time France was not really well liked. The British were more concerned about them keeping palship with Russia and Austria-Hungary, because this is during the period of the Three Emperors Alliance, the Drei Kaiserbund. Basically, it almost locked out the United Kingdom from Europe. That's actually partially why they started negotiating with France. But yeah, Kaiser Billy would definitely be into imperialism. He'd be really obsessed with trying to carve out land on planets. The Russians, I could see them try it, but their navy efforts were never that impressive anyway. And while they did actually have a fairly decent air force during World War One, for what they were, eh, Austria-Hungary never had colonial ambitions. They had way too many fucking problems at home. So you're not really going to see Austro-Hungarian colonies, just because they're already struggling with managing their own state.
Then, so the next page they bring up Victorian values, and is this how they display it as a virtue and a vice? So, for
Yeah,
instance, honesty, personal integrity, fair dealing, but as a vice, it's naivete, disdain for alien codes of behavior, um,
I kind of like
progress.
this because this is very similar to you know that glorious long train wreck that we covered, called Requiem of Rome. You know, that gloriously delicious book. This is
I wouldn't call.
emphasizing the two-faced nature of the morals that Victorians pushed, because the Victorians were known as the upright and moral society, but this is also during the period of Jack the Ripper, essentially.
Jack the Ripper. Um,
So this was also the
Use of
period of debauchery and alcoholism
yeah,
and
um,
prostitutes.
prostitutes, disdain for homosexuality, absolute racism,
Horrible
just
racism. Like actually
just
using
scientific
science.
racism.
Yes. They literally would
Um,
study your skull shape and they would invent excuses for why you're less human.
latent anti-Semitism, um,
Yep, this is around the time
mis-
of the Dreyfus affair.
a few years before, but
Around the time. Close enough. That's
miso
Edwardian, but still close enough.
misogyny and
This
let's not
is
forget the treatment of mental illness. This is
th-
before the lobotomy, but still.
this is, I think, during the period of electroshock therapy. This is also the period where this is where psychology has just started about. Sigmund Freud just really started. But this is the period in time where there is an actual disease known as female hysteria, where the solution was the psychologist would get his rubbly gloves and pound the
Make her
tuna, so
feel
to speak.
she could feel better.
Pound the tuna until the hysteria went away. So other aspects include loyalty, which can range from doing your job or being a brainless monster. Resolution, which means that you find strength to purpose, or you knee jerk and just refuse to change. All this sorts of stuff. And last but not least, pride of race, which can range from just having self esteem at your achievements to, well, kill them all. Yes, make them climax. But
I would say
basically,
like
Victorian society, they at their best, you get these larger than life, almost heroic figures. At their worst, you get the mustache twirling villain who's like, "I'm going to destroy the orphanage."
I mean that's more Edwardian, like Charles Dickens kind of thing.
Nah, Edwardian. No, Dickens was actually even before Victoria. That's George the Fourth.
Uh, um, they talk about how uh, British officials would have indirect rule. So they wouldn't directly govern. They just
It
they'd have
depended.
indirect rule. Yeah.
The British tended to be
Uh,
quite hands off with their governance, which is actually why they were able to do so well in terms of expansion. In fact, actually, it is trying to take a more direct reign in government, which was why the U.S. declared independence. Well, that and the U.S. wanted to evade taxes so bad. Reminder, the American Revolution was started by tax evasion.
tax evasion and the government basically saying, "Hey, can we have a say in this?" No, go fuck yourself.
And then the response was, no, you go fuck yourself. And we
Um,
made them go fuck themselves.
speaking of politics, they then bring up sort of the political how politics worked at the time. So you had the crown, you had the queen, but at this point, because of reforms, especially in 1832, um, monarchy's kind of just a ritual symbol.
Yeah,
Uh,
at this point, the last strong direct usage of monarchy power was honestly her predecessor, which I think was George the Fourth.
uh, so so 1886 is when they finally got universal male suffrage. So yeah, it
Well,
took them that
yeah.
long for that.
Well, no, it was originally
Um,
apportioned by wealth. You had to actually be able to have a certain amount of value. It's actually similar to the original U.S. system. The concept being that you had to at least have some level of responsibility. You had to be able to at least be partially able to keep yourself together, because that implies that you're with it enough to actually be able to vote reasonably intelligently. Also, at the end of the day, it's just we really fucking hate the pores. That's the other
I
big
mean,
reason. They just really fucking hate the pores.
I can understand that, but at the same time, it's like you're a citizen of the
No,
country,
that's
you're an adult, you
justifying. That's justifying it. In reality, it's fuck the poor.
yeah. Um,
But to give you an
because
idea, Austria-Hungary had more progressive voting laws until that point, and their voting laws were a complicated fucking nightmare. Do you want to know how crazy theirs were? it had universal male suffrage, but the way it worked was you got more votes based on your earnings. It was
Oh,
universal weighted by wealth, which I believe the highest class could get something like ridiculous, like 6 to 10 votes.
how was there not a socialist revolution? Why was it an ethnic one?
There was actually a pretty well known social democratic party, but they also were massively anti-Semitic and racist. They were
Oh,
socially
God.
progressive, but also horrendously fucking anti-Semitic and racist. By the way, the mayor of Austria, that a funny mustache man named Adolphus the Hitler, that guy, the Hitler man, the mayor of Austria was a social democrat.
Wait, his father.
Yeah, Hitler is Austrian. His father was a customs agent
Oh, I
for
thought
the
you meant like
Austro-Hungarian
the
Empire.
mayor.
No,
Yeah,
no, Adolf Hitler's dad was not a mayor. He was a customs agent that basically managed the border crossing,
yeah.
paperwork,
So,
that sort of thing.
so you probably frequently find a lot of Jews.
But no,
Um,
unironically, what happened was, yes, there was social reformists. They also were just horrendously fucking racist.
Speaking of political groups, so you actually at this point now have the liberals and the Tories.
Okay, so
The
at this
liberal,
point in time, the Parliament. This is this is basically after the Whig versus Tory death. This is when the Tories were starting to become the Conservative Party. This is also when the Liberal Party was still relevant. This is also the beginnings of the Labour Party. The Labour Party does exist. They're just relatively marginal. You'll usually find them in relatively oppressed areas like in northern England or in the borderlands of Scotland or in Wales.
major issues at this point is the Irish question, which is
Yeah.
either limited self-government or unionists. You have the obviously the issue of imperialism,
Mhm.
either for or against it. Um, and
Oh, and if you're wondering, the reason Home Rule kept failing is it actually would pass Parliament, but the House of Lords would shoot it down because this is before they were defanged. The House of Lords could actually squash a bill at this point still.
and then talk about this guy Salisbury, a traditional Tory who believed that Britain ought to be ruled by gentlemen bred for the purpose.
Lord
Um,
Salisbury was actually a British Prime Minister. None of these people are non-canon. They are all real people. Gladstone was a liberal Prime Minister. And well, yeah, Salisbury took place after him. Gladstone got his shit kicked in. Well, no, he just retired, and yeah,
I think Salisbury is supposed to be in power at this time.
yeah, he was.
And you now have the rising parties. You have the Irish Nationalists.
Yep,
You have the
they're getting more popular because Home Rule was already defeated at least once, and they were getting agitated.
I'm sure Britain will be able to address this without devolving into a two-state solution.
Um,
Um,
I mean, no, I did an
no.
entire video. Feel free to look at it. It's called the British Compulsion. No, they would make a two-state solution.
Yeah. George Bernard Shaw founds the Fabian Society, which socialists,
It's one of
and
many socialist movements.
William Morris advocates a utopian society.
Yep,
Marx will be dead here, and Kropotkin would uh,
Fyodor
start his
Kropotkin.
writings.
Oh no, Fyodor Kropotkin was one of the many anarchist writers. A lot of them would flee to the United Kingdom because they were actually allowed to espouse their beliefs, even if they were seen as contemptible. Other common writers in this time period would be Mikhail Bakunin was one. In the U.S., this is when the individualist strain of anarchism was around. I think it was his name, Beach Tucker or something.
You also have Lear.
This is also back when the international workers of the world, or the Wobblies, were actually relevant, especially in the United States.
You also have though career civil servants. Um, much like in the U.S., I'm assuming that they kind of stopped having a corrupt bureaucracy because, fun fact in the U.S., that's how one of our presidents died. Garfield was shot because a guy who supported him thought he would be able to get like a job at the U.S. Post Office. Didn't kill the president.
Oh no, you also got to remember that guy was crazy. You got to keep that part in mind too. He genuinely was like delusional. Like he wasn't
Yeah.
psychologically stable.
And thankfully the vice president was a reformer.
Well, Garfield was
Uh,
too, if I recall.
I
Both
don't
of
know that
them
much
were.
because
No, both of them were.
wait,
It's just
did the British ever attempt a three-state? And there's ways you could say it, but basically it's no, not not really.
did they ever attempt a three-state solution? Not really. They're usually of a two-state or a single-state solution. In fact, actually, that is one of the reasons one of the times the Home Rule Bill failed was because the Ulstermen did not want to be a part of the same unit as the Irishmen.
Um,
That is ultimately what led to bullshit like the Troubles.
uh,
Also, Joseph
so
Chamberlain is a real person. He is very well known for a variety of things. This is a real person. Uh, so
um,
he's really relevant.
the the that the upstart colonial office, which Cecil Rhodes had denounced as being run by missionaries, philanthropists, and Jews.
Yep.
Um,
Cecil
uh,
Rhodes really fucking hated Jewish people. He really fucking hated them. To give you an idea, Cecil Rhodes actually got into a legitimate newspaper war with the Rothschilds, if I recall correctly. Not the Rothschilds. It might have been. What's the Jewish family that specializes in diamond trade?
I don't know.
But basically, it was this Jewish family
You
that
have one?
made a massive fucking killing on the diamond trade in South Africa, and Cecil Rhodes threw a fit and got into a newspaper war with them.
It's not the beers, is it?
It might have been the beers.
You don't sound Jewish.
I don't know. I just remember Cecil Rhodes got into a pissing match with just because he really hated one of the diamond company owners.
Because how dare they be
How
rich and
how dare they
successful?
go to their devil temples and pray to the demiurge?
Was he that kind of anti-Semite?
I don't know. It just sounds like something he'd say.
Um,
I could see him
and
thinking Jewish people worship the devil. Let's be fair.
well, wait, did the protocols come out yet?
No, the Russian agitprop tool known as the Protocols of Zion were not written at this time yet. I think it's within 10 years though. Oh yeah, and if
Protocols
you're
of the
wondering,
Agents Memorials.
much like the anti-nuclear movement, Leninism, Stalinism, and well, oh fuck, fascism in general, actually.
I thought
Russia
that
is
was
once
kind of a
again responsible for creating absolute bullshit. The only thing Russia's good at is making up horrible fucking ideas and lying. They have never been good at anything else.
guns,
No,
novels,
no,
pressing novels.
maybe. Yeah, people talk about the Mosin Nagant, but that thing's surprisingly heavy, and while it's relatively reliable, there's better rifles on the market.
But then
Don't get me started on why the T-34 sucks. That's way out in the timeline, but these are the same people that thought let's build a tricycle tank.
honestly, I think we actually probably skip the Victorian section just because it's more just getting into the scene of Victorian Britain
Yep.
instead of
It
what
does
we're
give you
looking for
ideas
here, which
on the
is
type of mindset though. Like it tells you like the important aspects, like how Victorian society functioned. It goes into details about the class system, which is very important. If you're doing Space 1889, the class system is relatively important. It's similar to the societal functions and the honor system of the setting of Legend of the Five Rings. You kind of have to pay attention to that sort of thing. But yeah, there's the aristocrats, the gentry, urban middle class, which we're getting up there, and then finally the working schlubs, which had some pretty shitty lives.
it's a
Because
lot in
remember,
life.
this is Gilded Age working class. This is back when if you decided to you're this is where you basically were paid fuck all per hour to basically risk your life with a dangerous machinery, and if you complained about it, they could actually send a militia to beat you up. They could
Oh
send
no,
dudes with sticks to beat you up and leave you for dead.
I mean, did they get rid of child labor at this point?
Child labor, I think, was still legalized in certain specific cases, but they could only be used for so many hours.
There you go.
I think this was like when it was recently instructified, and that's only in the UK. In Italy, it is a scene of hell. Let me tell you about the sulfur mines of Sicily, baby. They are the closest you will see to pits of hell. The only other place that's actually as bad, a West Virginian coal mine. Uh, the,
At that time or modern day?
yes, because coal mines are still pretty bad. It's just coal mines in the 1890s. Your life expectancy was like 35, my guy. If the black lung didn't kill you, the horrible conditions and shit pay would.
There's a reason why that is where an actual uprising occurs.
There's an actual uprising that occurred in West Virginia, and it was crushed to a man because a sheriff tricked the National Guard because he was in the company's pocket to fire on them. It turned into a limited uprising, and well, yeah,
Battle of Blair Mountain.
Battle of Blair Mountain. It was the death knell of industrial unionism. Alongside that asshole Woodrow Wilson and that other asshole Warren G. Harding. The, in my opinion, worst back-to-back presidents you've ever seen since what was it, Franklin Pierce and Millard Fillmore.
I mean,
I
to be fair, at least Pierce and Fillmore did nothing.
Yeah, they did nothing. For better and worse. Warren G. Harding is the most corrupt and awful president we've not the almost awful, but one of the most corrupt presidents we ever had. Thank goodness he died in office. And Woodrow Wilson is literally the devil. Unironically, Woodrow Wilson is the worst human being to have ever become a leader of a major nation.
Um, there is one
Democratically
guy in
elected leader of a nation.
yeah, guy in Germany.
Oh, I didn't. I forgot. I forgot you really hated Hans. What was his name? Hans Adenauer. Yeah,
I mean,
Adenauer's the worst.
does coalition count?
Yeah, like if you're wondering, Imsit really hates Adenauer. Konrad Adenauer. He's like the worst. Oh wait, no. Oh wait, no. I know who you're talking about. Yeah, Otto von Bismarck. Yeah, him.
I haven't done that much research into him, but I actually think he's okay.
I'm fucking with you. Let me tell you, he has one testicle. He was a vegetarian, and he believed he had the soul of a wolf because his name was Adolf. I'm not kidding. Mustache Man was a wolfaboo.
So honestly, I am thinking of skipping to the
Fair, fair.
section to get to the actual like.
They they
'Cause a lot of
they
this is
talk about
just
going
set.
native, which was a big thing, where basically people fell in love with the cultural traditions, the exotic cultural traditions of people around the world, because this was back when you, you didn't really know about this, so you just kind of picked up stuff.
And then there's the guys that, well, went crazy.
Yeah, those
Is what
ones are
Heart of
fun.
Darkness is based on.
Uh, but yeah, social classes are important. The army. Here's the thing: the British actually were not known for their large and effective armies. The British Army was not that big. It was only about 100 to 150,000 usually. It was often
I'm assuming it
supplemented
was
by
the
colonial
Navy.
troops because most of their manpower went into the Navy.
Well, they have a big
Uh, be,
empire.
because their whole thing is the wall, a wooden wall, the Great Wooden Wall of our fleet. Oh man,
I,
I
I,
bet Tech's wishing he could talk about this because this is also during the mass expansion and refinement of naval warfare. Like this is the point in time where you could design a ship, get it out as fast as you can in like 3 years, but by the time it's out, it's already obsolete.
I,
This is
I'm
the time period where the HMS Polyphemus was made, which was a torpedo ram ship. If you're wondering, a
it,
torpedo ram, the concept is that well, as you work, you're a big fucking torpedo. You make a large ship that moves really fast like a torpedo, and you ram into the side of them.
a
And the
suicide
concept was
bomber.
sound, but what happened was torpedoes got a shitload faster within the 5 years it took to build it. Also, armor got notably better in those same 5 years, mainly because of refinements to the process. Yep, boats and
I'm skipping.
trains. If you have the autism that loves boats and trains, this is the time period, baby.
I am skipping ahead, but at least something that I now finally understand. They explain the currency of Britain. 12 pennies is a shilling. 20 shillings is a
Oh yeah, they go
pound.
into the economy. So okay, this is
So I finally know what that is.
so Impsit, here's the question since you looked it up. When did the UK decimalize their currency?
Um, I assume around this time.
No. I think it wasn't until the 1970s they did.
Leaders of the world, everyone. Can't use the Dewey Decimal System.
You know the funny thing is, people people ding on the U.S. for being so slow to get rid of the imperial system, and then you hear that shit. But don't get me wrong, imperial system's also of the devil. But you know, at
I mean,
least
we
we
use
didn't have to.
both.
At least we didn't have to figure out how the fuck a farthing compares to a shilling, compares to a pound, compares to a pence. By the way, another currency that the UK had at this time was the guinea, which was the gold currency and worth a lot. I don't remember the exchange rate between a guinea and a pound. A pound, by the way, refers to the originally silver coin. That's why it's called sterling.
Yeah. They do say that currency conversions. Pound sterling is about $5 in American currency. I don't know if they're saying at that
At
time
that
American
time
currency
period.
or
Although, no, actually, it's also in modern day. We usually keep the pound about pegged to $5.
the pound's about like the exchange rate's about like near equivalent.
Yeah, I think we kept it just because of trade benefits about the same. It's similar to how the Japanese yen tries to stay as close as it can to being 1 yen equals about 1 penny. It's
A
similar to how the
shilling is about
Chinese also chart their yuan to be about a dime.
25 cents, and a penny is 2 pennies.
Yep, the pen one tuppence in the UK is worth 4 pennies or about a nickel. They also have an
Um,
entire section on remarkable women for Victorian era because there's quite a bit.
and guns.
They have a lot of guns. Also chivalric orders. We're gonna skip past the referees, I think.
Yeah,
That's a Martian, by
still
the
have
way, this bat-looking
muskets.
man with the Fu Manchu.
Look at the guns here. You see, you have bolt-action rifles, bolt-action carbines.
Well, no, no. Before
Uh,
we do, there's some detailed NPCs like Baron von Gruber.
I didn't know if these were actual. Well, I don't know if some of them were actual people, or if they were just made
Oh
up.
no, no. His name I think is legitimately based on the character Hans Gruber from Die Hard.
This came out before that movie.
88. You're probably right.
If not, this guy most likely would have been. Looks like the father of Hermann Goring.
No, no. It's a Victorian era Stavro Blofeld. You can see the scar on his face. See it?
Oh,
He has a monocle.
Rav- Ravachol the Anarchist. He was born Francois. Oh God, it's he's both French and German.
Oh, actually, Ravachol is based on a very famous anarchist song. He picked up the name from the song.
Oh,
Also, yes, he's Franco-German. He's an Alsatian.
so um, anarchism seems to legitimize his crimes as blows against the class enemy, yet he displays a streak of sincere conviction as well. He explained in his trial that my object was to terrorize so as to force society to look attentively at those who suffer. One anarchist paper compared to Jesus, while others questioned whether a man who bludgeoned old ladies could bring about a perfect society. Uh, yeah, I have no idea. This does sound like it'd be a real person for some reason.
Partially. These aren't real people. There's also Andre Foucault, who's, I think, based on the Heart of Darkness book.
He certainly looks like Marlon Brando,
Yeah.
at least in the gut.
There's also an
Some,
experienced Martian. Again, here he is as the Batman. There's the Thug King, the High Martian King of the Baravangian hosts. There's Burnaby. It's just to give you ideas on how NPCs would work. I kind of like that they give you several examples that you can just legitimately throw into your campaign. I just wanted to show them off. Then they go into details on how the mechanics work. This shows you the task difficulty levels, which range from the target of 4 to a target of 20. Shows you a typical map, little ideas on how adventures would work. Souvenirs, because here's the thing, right? It's the 1880s. You're going to be exploring. Occupy them. I'm getting distracted.
uh, so yeah, souvenirs. You know, the things that people will end up, well, putting in museums, and then about 120 years later will be asked to repatriate back to their countries. Let me see. We'll show it, but again, in terms of the list of uh, gear, it's a lot of actually useful stuff. Navigational instruments, telephonic instruments, um, you know, uh, axes, picks, hatchets, bear traps, which I have no idea what you'd be using that for on Mars except to fight the space bears.
Sorry about
Um,
that. The dog crisis happened.
ah,
Wasn't much of
I was
anything
talking about
bad.
the equipment and questioning why they would need a bear trap. I mean, unless it's for the space bears.
It's for Martian bears, and for escaping Martian slaves.
Please tell me they don't. Well, wait, why would they wouldn't have that? Oh god, they have that, don't they?
Probably.
Even though it's been banned. Well, wait, because they're not human.
Yep.
Um,
So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff.
cameras.
The dissecting kit, laboratory apparati, telegraphic instruments, telephonic, the
Bear
Millwright's
traps are made to catch
companion and
humans.
handy book.
Apparently, bear traps were actually made to capture humans.
Yes, they were. A portable forge, an entire photographic lab. I like how they have the old timey camera.
You just need to stay there for about 20 minutes and we'll be ready.
The the carpet bag. Clothing, rough living. A gramophone, the latest invention of Thomas Edison, a machine that can preserve any sound and reproduce it at any time. The tinker's delight. I love equipment manuals like this. It's so cute.
And you know what? I think because it is pretty much like real world, it gives it kind of an authenticity.
Yeah, it just feels nice. You know, hey, remember in Cadillacs and Dinosaurs where this section was kind of neat, but they didn't really put a lot of heart into it. This one didn't fall for it. By the way, you have power plants which allow you to do a variety of things. And the variety of fuels you can use include kerosene, coal oil, petroleum waste, because this is back when oil was considered a waste product, and other
I'm
flammable
surprised they did,
liquids.
I'm surprised they didn't use whales.
Space, they don't have space whales yet. We'll have to find them. Peat wood?
Did they stop using whales at this point?
Not yet, but it was dying out. The carbide, which is a powder that reacts with water to produce acetylene gas. There's also explosives. There's gunpowder, which, while outdated, it's still used. And that is the thing. In 1889, oh, this is something that I should mention. This is just 3 years after I think it's called Poudre B or Powder Formula B was invented, or it's like less than a decade. Powder B is known because it's the first smokeless powder and the first bolt-action rifle, the Lebel Model 1980, not 19, the Lebel Model 1886 was made. And this is actually when the Germans just recently finished and fixed up the Gewehr Model 88, which became one of the most well-known guns in China, known as the Hanyang 88. Just about a year or two off from the Mosin Nagant, which, by the way, is a very expensive rifle to build, hilariously. But they made so many of them. Well, yeah, Russia has a bad habit of making a very expensive thing and then making a fuckload of them. No, seriously, for a bolt-action rifle, the Mosin Nagant was surprisingly expensive to make.
Really, how much?
I think it was like something between 1.2 to 1.5 times more expensive than the comparison to the Germans or the French. It balances out though because the Mosin Nagant was a lighter weapon than the French Lebel.
Ah,
It also was more comfortable to use, mainly because the French invented the bolt action smokeless powder rifle first, so it had the most faults. And Germany had to take a year to fix their model because the very first year production 88s were pretty shitty. Dynamite, which, if you're wondering, Alfred Nobel built it specifically because of how unreliable nitroglycerin and gunpowder were. He designed it as a way to make a controlled explosive that was supposed to make mining safer. He stared in horror as it was used to make explosives for war. That's why he made the Nobel Peace Prize.
my explosives were used for explosive purposes?
Yeah, he kind of had that smooth-brained reaction that Oppenheimer did. What do you mean my atomic bomb that destroys a city on impact was used? I don't understand.
I did. Wait, so you're telling me a huge explosion just blew up and vaporized things that were around it.
Who'd have thought that a weapon that was intentionally designed to end a war was used to end a war? I don't understand. Oh, by the way,
What
yes,
what what
nitroglycerin is very unstable.
what did Truman say when Oppenheimer was going to his office pleading him to like not use the nuclear bomb anymore?
I think he told him to fuck off, you spineless wimp, or something like that. The thing is, Truman was not happy about it either, but he basically said, compare this to the invasion, and this was the more merciful option.
It,
That's the thing.
yeah,
Truman actually spent a couple days seriously thinking on whether or not to use it.
it kind of was. Also because, well, they also had bombed pretty much everything else.
Basically, Truman was hoping that if he used them, they wouldn't have to send hundreds of thousands of American boys and girls, because they were sent alongside as nurses, to die. As well as, while he didn't care as much, this would still kill millions of Japanese people. Operation Downfall would have been bloody.
And actually just logistics as well, because what if the Emperor dies?
Fun fact,
That,
actually, one of the targets was supposed to be Kyoto, if I remember right.
and then they probably thought maybe killing their god Emperor is not a good idea.
That is actually the conclusion that Dugout Doug MacArthur came up with. That's why he tried to exonerate Emperor Hirohito during the trials. That is also why they played somewhat softball with several members of Unit 731.
He did something, well, and besides, he did something smart.
I know he had a stopped clock moment. It was kind of amazing.
Also, he was against using nuclear weapons. He was
No,
all for that with the Chinese.
no. MacArthur was totally okay with bombing China into the Stone Age.
I know, but the Japanese, though, he seemed not.
No. MacArthur was okay with it. If he said anything otherwise, he's full of shit. By the
Uh,
way, if you're wondering, the U.S. kind of was bluffing that they had more bombs. Although, unironically, if the Japanese continued to resist, we would have just kept doing it until they fucking gave up.
I mean, even if we didn't have any, we knew how to build them.
We had one about a month away from completion. We would have just used it. Fun fact: it was the infamous Demon Core. The infamous Demon Core was going to be bomb number 3. Uh, the Japanese did wisely surrender. It was then used for criticality experiments, and it claimed the lives of 2 early nuclear physicists, although the second one was kind of a reckless jackass.
Moving on to more modern weapons,
Yep, pistols are common,
firearms.
single-barreled pistols. They give a variety. They don't really specify types. Also, yes, there were multi-barreled
Now,
pistols. They were known as pepper box models.
you've just various types of rifles. You have 12 gauge and 20 gauge shotguns.
Yep. If you're wondering, gauge. The smaller the gauge, the larger the buckshot you're using, or the larger the shell, I should say.
And basically, I just go by what does the most damage in Fallout New Vegas, and I just go from there.
Also, muzzle-loading rifles were a thing. Muskets are still floating around, particularly in colonial regions. Same with lever-action rifles. They were very well produced during the 1870s to to early 1880s. So you'd still
Mm,
see a bunch of those going around. You wouldn't really see smoothbore muskets that often, although they did occasionally appear. Same with smoothbore carbines. Carbines being essentially cut-down rifles. I'm actually surprised they're not showing because there's lower gauges they could have used. Oh,
Like an 8
I
gauge.
like their smoothbore muskets and carbines. They're based on the Jezzails of Persian and Afghani legend.
They give Martian artillery muzzle-loaded guns mounted on wooden carriages. They fire round shot or grape shot.
Yep.
So
Oh,
what I'm
they do
gathering is
mention 20 gauge. Yeah, they're small.
Martians are on modern technological level.
Armor. That's a bunch of stuff you can get. Primitive missile weapons, because you would have bows and arrows, spears, javelins, knives. Martian artillery. They are muzzle-loading guns on wooden carriages. They fire shot or grape shot. By 1889, I believe breech-loaded artillery was becoming a thing. It was more of a pain because if you're wondering why muzzle loading was more popular and took longer to replace on artillery, it's mainly just due to reliability. Uh, Basically, in a breech-loading artillery round, there's always a little worry that if you load the powder incorrectly, what would happen is the breech would blow off and kill you. So let me take a look. They fire a round shot or grape shot. They don't actually. They actually don't show you how they're any different from just standard cannonry.
No.
European artillery considers is rifled breech-loading pipes with fire shell and shrapnels because, yep, this is back when we were starting to build full-on big-ass guns.
And speaking of big guns, machine guns.
Yeah, machine guns were very popular at this time period. The Gatling 50 by this point is kind of on the obsolete side.
We've
There's
now
also
gone
the
from six.
Militairus, which was an early machine gun. The French were well known for loving them. In fact, actually, the Franco-Prussian War was the first time that the Auto Militairus was used in any warfare. That machine guns were used in European warfare. The Germans basically kicked their shit in because they didn't have enough of them. Also, every other aspect of French tactical and military doctrine was garbage.
We've got the Gardner, the Nordfelt, and the Maxim,
Maxim being
which is
basically the mm,
it's
the
the
be-
big water-cooled one.
it's the big water cooled one, but it's also the first modern machine gun. Like it is experimental, but it's a very impressive weapon at this point.
I believe they are used in World War One.
Yeah, Maxims were used on all sides in World War One. They were that good. They were heavy as
Now we
hell,
go.
but still,
Now we go to the invented devices.
because there's
Ether.
going to be a bunch. So ether is essentially, as I mentioned, the fictional beyond gas state of matter that's in space.
So we got the ether propeller, the ether sail, the etherometer,
Basically, you use
uh,
electricity to play around with it.
a Hertzian wave communicator, otherwise known as a radio.
It's basically radio that can go, I believe. Oh no, no, okay.
It's just radio. I mean, we should probably have gotten that because well, it's by Hertz.
Yeah, a lightning
Uh,
cannon.
a freeze ray.
Hell yeah.
I'm
Weather
on,
control ray.
hold on, I need characters hit by the ray who fail their saving roll are frozen solid. They will thaw out 1 hour later.
Yeah, it's
Um,
it's fine. You're not hurt really.
mind control ray.
Yep. You like how it's gone full pulpy?
This feels though a bit 50s pulp.
No, no, no. To give you an idea, these were plots in Barsoom. Mind control. Basically, these were things that you'd see in adventure serials. This is more sci-fi, but still, this is like Buck
Uh,
Rogers stuff too. That's 1920s.
you have super hard steel, rustless iron,
Yeah,
uh, woven steel, uh,
that allows you
cast
to
stone
where.
chemical,
Yeah,
transparent aluminum,
you have to have transparent aluminum. Volcanic
liquid
control device.
liquid fire, a compound which burns fiercely when exposed to oxygen, and water will not extinguish it, but dry sand will. I assume that's it's napalm.
Uh, it's super napalm. There's also a fuel refiner, which makes fuel more effective. There's detonite, which is super dynamite.
Noiseless powder. It it's literally just makes it so no one can hear your guns.
That seems a little bit bullshit, but whatever. It's pulp.
And hellfire.
Yeah.
Can melt steel in seconds.
It's basically thermite. Yeah, it's
Um,
basically
elec
thermite.
Electricity, hand lamp, batteries, um,
Electric engines, because here's the thing: electric cars are less new than you think.
electric railgun,
Yeah,
and the electric rifle, which is noiseless and
superconductors too.
smokeless.
Oh, they have the They have the actual laser. Like this is the original laser. Oh,
Also, is
that's
that's got
great.
that's a huge stock that
That's
he's
where
not
the
using at
battery
all.
is. There's the forced drop boiler, which is a better version of a normal Hellfire can melt steel beams. Yes, they can. Internal
The internal
combustion engines, solar boilers,
energy cells.
heat ray.
Ooh, biochemistry.
No, you forgot the
Outputs
atom,
harnesses the power of the atom. Never getting. So wait, they just have fusion.
which I think is kind of nonsense just because of the fact that, in terms of scientific discoveries, radiation and essentially atomic structures, this is like I think back when they were still using the plum pudding model. This is before Niels Bohr really did the first relatively accurate transcription of what an atom would look like. I mean, he's still wrong because it's basically an electron shell, but whatever. All I can tell you is that my guess is it's basically they're relying hard on Barsoom because the Martians did unlock nuclear radioactive nuclear energy.
Uh, Biochemistry. Preservatives.
Yay!
Ap aspirin. Antibiotics.
I like how
Sure.
aspirin is legitimately its own entry.
I mean, it's a pain reliever. Yeah, it's
Oh, hey, we invented antibiotics early. That's quite impressive.
strength elixir. I'm assuming that is
Steroids,
steroid. Yeah, that's gotta be steroid. Uh, sleep gas.
mind control drugs.
That's just for hypnol.
Hey,
Oh
food
no, wait.
pills.
No, that's just sleep gas.
Food pills. I like the essential nutrients and minerals of food condensed into a tablet.
And
It provides
synthetic
the equivalent
nutrient.
of a full meal.
Infrared sight liquid. Oh, it's eye drops that make you see in infrared. That's gotta be awful.
I bet your eyes bleed regularly.
That is actually just because it lasts for hours. That is not that is awful.
Not as awful as the orbital model is to Squirrel Killer. Yeah, I know it's complete horseshit, but it's one of the simpler ways to transcribe and show off. Because drawing actual electron valence shells makes my eyes bleed.
Synthetic nutrient, an artificial food which induces rapidly accelerated growth when ingested.
This allows you to
It
make
also,
super cows.
except for this, um, when this food is when fed this food instead of normal, the animal will increase in weight by 10% per week. So this is great for feeders, those with a feeder fetish.
I know, because the uncontrolled growth.
Yeah, the animal will refuse all other food, and so you've just now made it addicted. And after a failed experimental die, it should cause uncontrolled growth and or dangerous behavioral changes in experimental animals and perhaps local plant life. So I assume you've just induced cancer into this creature.
No, you just created a giant monster. Like, Attack of the 50-foot chicken.
hmm
Uh,
Prolonged hibernation device. So, oh, we just have
Hypersleep.
cryosleep now.
Synthetic life.
No, no, and synthetic liftwood. So, wait a minute. What's with the colonialism then?
Because liftwood is
We
easier to
have the
harvest.
we have the liftwood now.
Well, it's also, it has to be created in a laboratory, and it's a lot cheaper just to cut down liftwood.
All right. Let's see. Precision machinery. Vodafone. Um.
I
Oh, robots.
Yeah, robots are a thing.
Mechanical Man. They
Clockwork robots, baby.
that, that should have been up front.
Nah.
I would have loved like a brief like short story or something like that that just is like a guy traveling, you know, to Mars, meets a robot and all, sees a guy with a laser gun, all that sort of stuff.
That's more of a World of Darkness thing. This is Games Designer Workshop, which plays things very differently.
Oh, you have an underwater gun.
A specially made breach gun that fires streamlined underwater projectiles.
Uh, Now for transportation, there's a spacesuit, which just looks like a diving suit.
I love that it's based on an old diving suit.
Oh no, it literally is a diving suit.
I love it. Hey, look!
Um,
It's the heavy tractor. It's the walking tripod that you wanted.
the land juggernaut.
Oh, I love that they have a proto tank and it looks so shit.
But where is that?
The land
Is
juggernaut.
that?
You don't see the
Oh,
walking tripod right above it?
I see the. Oh yeah, I do. I just for some reason I saw the juggernaut. It just looked like a. It looked like the front of a train
Nope.
with guns. Well, I mean, look, it's got the.
You didn't see the chicken legs that it
Oh
has?
no, I see. I see the tripod. Um,
They also show a
it has
hydrofoil, which is a real thing.
one
Submarines and a
heavy
deep
machine
diving submarine.
and a mole drill
Yep.
and a flight.
This allows you to explore the underground world filled with dinosaurs, by the way. I'm not
Um,
kidding.
so you have hydrogen lift.
Oh, don't you
Mon.
love cone parachute?
Yes. Please tell me that actually existed.
Yes, it did. It was an early design for a parachute.
How many people died using that?
Yes.
Improved Liftwood.
Oh,
Wait, wait.
I love the personal conveyor, which is just a bike with some fucking helicopter blades.
I more like that it's guy in a military uniform riding it, making me realize that this is a military vehicle
It's a military vehicle.
and a helicopter that looks kind of modern.
It looks surprisingly modern, yeah. There's also the auto gyro right below it.
And then there's optics.
Oh, this is stuff that if you're really interested in naval combat, here we go. Got telescopes, rangefinders, armored glass, infrareds, heat rays
Oh,
again. They love their heat rays.
oh, and computers exist.
Yep, combination devices.
It's a fucking computer in 1889.
There's also aeroplanes, although these are kind of primitive. You know, I can kind of understand airplanes existing just because of things like Liftwood and shit.
Transportation.
Oh, actually, I think I just remembered. If I remember right, the Space 1889 game actually has you trying to rescue Thomas Edison on Mars. If I remember right.
You can ride an elephant.
Yep, you can ride elephants, cattle, camels, donkeys. You can
And a
also
human.
ride dinosaurs.
You have a human porter.
Yes, you can literally hire Umbubu to help you.
Yes, you have a Pachyosaurus and a Martian Rumet beer and a shunt.
Yep,
And then your boats.
which includes your aerial vessels, which oh god, they do it. They show off they even do the classes. Aerial
British
gunboats.
British aphid class.
Oh, I love it.
Zeppelin. The
Yep.
Martian small screw galley. Um, these are just
If you're wondering, that's a nod to
these are just
Barsoom because the
Roman boats.
Martians had. Well, no, it's because the Martians actually did have a space fleet in Barsoom. Basically, this is a nod to how they had a pretty developed fleet. You
And
didn't
on to the
expect that, did
science.
you?
No, I did not.
They get pretty big too. They could get up to about. They could displace up to 2,000 tons. Science! Oh no, she's about to get killed by the Otyug or the what's the name of it? Dianoga.
Yeah,
Oh no.
while the other guy's just not giving a shit.
No, he's actually waiting for the experiment to begin.
Oh god, no, no, I realized Dark Thought. He's the pimp.
Yes, he is.
This is not a science fair. This is a night out
This is a pervert
between a
trying to
lady
pretend he's Charles Darwin.
between a lady of the night and a squid monster.
Come on, love. Let him have at it. I get paid to buy the shilling for you.
Uh, so the science of the time.
So yeah,
Uh,
The Victorian period was an era of mass improvement in understanding of how things worked, but holy shit, they still had some dumb ideas. To give you an idea, this is right when we started understanding, huh, maybe I should wash my hands.
why?
Because I notice occasionally, after I wash my hands, like, after to get the blood off and I do the next surgery, and I use like this thing called soap, sometimes they don't fucking die.
So if you wash your hands off with processed animal fat, it it saves lives.
I know, it's
Poppycock.
so weird. It's so odd. I don't
Also,
understand
did you hear
it.
about that guy Darwin? Says somehow that animals they change due to their
Yeah,
natural environment instead of, you know, obviously what happens is where they take off of the traits of their parent.
that's a bit daft, isn't it? He just showed up. He just took photos of some weird finches. I think it's actually just a case of God gave them what they needed, combined with the fact
Next
that
thing he'll
they
be
just did what Lamarck said. They just wanted the thing, so they
yeah.
grew the thing.
Next thing he'll be saying we're descended from uh, the origin of our species in Africa and not Limeria.
No,
Is
it's obviously
obviously
in
well placed.
Hyperborea. They're full of crap.
No, no, my favorite was that there was some guy I think it was in Argentina who proposed that basically all the ancient, you know, mythical sort of landmasses, Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, that's where the well, white, black, and yellow people would have been
Yeah,
from,
it was actually
and that
considered, especially when
oh,
well, no,
and the red
I
people.
think they actually considered it because they found evidence of a microcontinent. I think they realized Kerguelen Islands were a microcontinent. So there was like some
This
minor pathetic attempt to justify it.
this also led to the development of the idea of forced interracial breeding.
Yeah, basically this Argentinian guy, I know who you're talking about. He believed that like races were comprised of white, yellow, and black, and the intermixing was the result of those meeting.
I think basically saying it would create a better person. Not like not like at least the way I got it, it was not like we're creating the superior race, but more like this is just,
Well, I mean,
you
he
know,
did do a
like
little bit of that
utopian.
because he tried to say Argentina's strong because we mix all race.
It was more like more like in a utopian rather than in a kill all of the non-us people.
But yeah, Darwin caused quite a bit of an uproar. To give you an idea, they mentioned Huxley. He threw a fit and basically tried as hard as he could to deny Darwin. To the point where he actually fabricated evidence because, you can do that.
He also
Um,
seems to have believed that, believed in the Bob Chipman model that, or I guess the ideas Bob Chipman has, where science effectively made religion obsolete.
yep. Also, if you're wondering, the Victorian era is where anyone could be a scientist. As long as you had the hobby and the time, you could just do whatever. To give you an idea, some of the earliest paleontologists were people who just liked to walk along beaches and found weird ass fossils.
They asked me if I had a degree in theoretical physics. I said I had a theoretical degree in physics.
I mean, this is I mean, while it's a little bit later, if you did you know that tectonic theory wasn't actually posited at all by a geologist?
Ooh,
A weatherman. A weatherman who was really obsessed with studying rock formations.
I mean that makes at least he's in the same
He was also
field of
kind of demented and had a
studying the
bunch
Earth
of other really stupid theories.
that the Jews were living in the rocks.
I don't remember what some of the other ones were, but he had some really wild hypotheses about other things.
So see, then I guess say like in terms of game mechanics, your various sciences are physics, chemistry, biology, geology, and archaeology.
Well, that's for straight up
Uh,
science. Engineering includes naval architecture, structural engineering, earthworks, and explosives. Mechanics is electricity, steams, and machinery. This is just in general. Honestly, they recommend that referees probably would allow you to come up with other fields of study. The many monkey trials with rhesus monkeys were only starting. We did not get quite to the pit of despair and the screaming at children until they're traumatized phased yet. That's like 30 years from now because
no,
1889 was when psychology just started coming about.
I think that was 30s actually,
Yeah,
like
psychology is a
1930s.
really recent field of study, the study of the mind in that regard.
There's we end up in the setting, you end up creating a colony that is just the planet of the apes, but they all believe in Freud.
I'm just now Freud was a weird sex pest at times, so imagine that.
Bonobos with that. Yeah, they
General
do say
re
other.
general research, yep, you have to do research and study things, so you have to take notes, do things like that. You have to roll consistently to do it. Basically, it's telling you that you have to actually study and do the science, and this allows you to invent experimental devices which may or may not work. And as you go along, you have to design it better and better so that its reliability goes up. It also tells you how to make computers.
They
Combination
also do say
devices are early computers, so you can make your own supercomputer.
that super scientific devices should have limitations.
Well,
Powerful
yeah,
weapons
based on
should be,
materials and stuff that you use to make
yeah.
it.
Well, basically, they're saying no hip pocket ray guns or disintegrators. If you're gonna have that, it is a giant machine.
Like, you can maybe miniaturize it, but it's like, look, I've made a heat ray 20% smaller, and it's still fucking massive. But rather than weighing like 800 tons, it's now a more svelte 600 tons.
Then go into designing your own ether flyer.
Yeah, you can design your own, because remember, this is the time period of aviation, and any person with a background in engineering, especially once successful glider tests and flight records were done, everyone got into that game. To give you an idea, a lot of airplane companies started by just some dude in his shed at this time.
And I also think this does feel a lot like Traveler, where you you are just having your own ship.
hmm I mean, this is an '80s RPG, especially kind of sci fantasy. I'm not surprised there's a lot of Traveler vibes. They might have been partially inspired by it. By the way, here's all of the research areas you can go into. There's a lot of them. Ether flyers. They go into designing them bit by bit because if you're going around, flyers are the most convenient way to get around. Just legitimately, it's the best way to get around. They also show you power plants, which the most common ones are conventional boilers, but there's other ones which gives you a consumption rate and so on. They also warn you about availability. I like how they just go into all this detail about making your own airship. I, it almost kind of detracts, but I also think it kind of helps. Like it gives you a really strong idea, and then it gets into combat. It's
A
like have
rare
at
deep
thee,
water, a rare deep water Jew.
the rare deep water Jew.
I'm just imagining you're forced to take on a group of proto-Nazis as they search for the hidden underwater Jews.
I'm just envisioning you go to the oceans of Mars and there's like the equivalent of the deep ones, but they're all Jewish, so they offer you some blocks on some weird equivalent of bread. They just offer you some locks.
It's just like they're just Jews. Like they're squid monster, everything like that. But they've got their rabbi, they got the Torah, they've got the Kippah and everything.
And it's just written in some horrifying eldritch language, but they're normal Jews in every way, up to and including deep sea delicatessens.
Like, think about it this way. Listen, I wouldn't. Basically, it's like the whole you can't eat the unclean animal, which is a lot of seafood. So it's like, eh, well, at least we won't be eating ourselves.
No, what's unclean for you is definitely clean for me. Honestly, but there is one thing we both agree on. That thing points to pigs. Is something you don't eat. That's the one thing the deep sea Jews also agree with normal Jews on.
You see,
It's the one most. That's the one commonality. God really just fucking hates pork.
actually, let's just explain Dagon then. Remember, Dagon gets beaten by God in the Bible.
And these are deep ones that are like Dagon's a puss. They convert.
Like, there's a reason why the sea people never attacked you.
I'm just now envisioning a Call of Cthulhu one-shot shitpost where a town thinks they're terrorized by deep ones, but really they're just going to the synagogue, like the abandoned synagogue. Oh, that's so goofy. If you're wondering how combat works, it's pretty similar in general to stuff. Blah blah blah. It works like most combat systems. There's saving rolls, there's melee, blah 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 blah.
Let's see if we. What's next up? I mean, they give
Heavy
altitude, and
weapons.
so
Those are things that are too heavy for you to use by yourself. They're usually emplaced as a result. That includes machine guns and artillery.
now they have animal combat, which is somehow separate.
Uh, I can understand it. It's basically there's also aerial combat, which is its own thing, obviously. Oh, there is a factor I'm going to point out for altitude. Because aerial combat is a three-dimensional thing, this also includes some types of ship combat. You have to actually determine how high you are. You can go up or down an altitude level per turn at no cost. After that, you have to expend more time. There's also wind. A variety of airplanes cannot act, not airplanes, a variety of air vehicles rely on the wind pretty badly to move. So wind can fuck you. They also show you Martian lob guns, which are basically big fucking mortars. And also,
Se-
also one of the actions you can do is ramming.
This seems like this will require miniatures.
Aerial
I mean,
combat is kind of a pain in the butt, but yeah, you probably should do minis gaming with it
miniatures or markers of some sort.
because you need to because it's a lot more not clunky, but it's a lot more fiddly.
Well, no, it's more so because they specifically say, as for ramming, they're moved uh, into the hex it occupies. You move your vessel into the enemy vessel into the hex they occupy. So
Hmm.
that means a map. There has to be a map.
Yep, and you then have to go to probably a closer up map if you're going to do boarding actions. It's a bit of a nightmare. It's one of the few flaws. Also, Venusian encounters. Venus is the land of dinosaurs, which makes sense because they're actually going kind of with the standard sci-fi tropes where the closer to the sun, the younger the planet is in terms of biosphere. Because on Mercury, you run into shit like anomalocaris and hallucinogencia and orthocones. Like we're talking
Isn't there a,
Cambrian and Devonian life.
isn't there a isn't there a planetoid that's closer to the sun than Mercury?
Oh yeah. Oh, you're talking about the hypothetical Vulcan. Basically, there was a concept based on initial gravity mechanic calculations that Mercury had weird perturb disturbances. I don't know how to say perturbations. Disturbances in its gravity, which would indicate traditionally that there's something affecting it, which is not the sun. If you're wondering, quantum mechanics actually explained it. No, it wasn't quantum mechanics. It was relativistic mechanics that did. Um, Although, funnily enough, relativistic mechanics don't perfectly explain the weird wobbles Neptune sometimes go through, which is why there is actually a hypothesized Planet X. There is actually a
Isn't planet
hypothesized Planet X. It is not the Nibiru thing that 2012 espoused. The idea is it's a relatively decent sized ice to gas giant that's hanging out in the Kuiper Belt.
Can it be Planet 9?
Planet X because X refers to mystery in this case.
Uh, Actually, yeah, that would make sense. Although,
It's also sometimes been called Planet 9. Also, there is the hypothetical planet that was, I forget the name that it was called, but it was a what if the asteroid belt wasn't disturbed and created by Jupiter, affecting the formations of a planet there. Because what happened was Jupiter used to actually be closer to the sun and then it slowly spiraled out, I think. I don't remember if hot Jupiters form because they drift in towards the sun or they start there and then they drift away. I don't recall. I think it's the other way around. I think they start out there and then they drift closer. All I do know is the art in on page 109 is not very good. It's very rough. They're going for
oh
Frank
no,
Frazetta
look at
and it's gone AI generated.
look at 112. Brings off 70s porn vibes.
You mean the tentacles or the weird skull bird?
No, the guy with
Oh,
the mustache.
the marker drawings here. You
Yeah,
like how they just sometimes to add color, just they sharpie in colors with
it
like
looks like it's the
crayons
cover
or
for
markers.
the porn parody of Space 1889.
1889, the pornographic version. They're going for more of like a Tarzan vibe.
Uh,
So travel and exploration. Yeah, here's the thing. In terms of travel, it takes time to go to places. Like you can go on the road, and they describe it. There's the large scale maps, which is where you can figure out where you're supposed to go. And then there's the mid scale maps, which are closer up that uses hexes because they actually believe in using hex maps. And then there's the small scale maps, which are actually useful for kind of specific details. In terms of land travels, animals are very common. Trains are only available on Earth, so you're not really going to see trains, sadly, in this setting if you're on Mars. I'm a bit surprised because you'd think that the British Empire would build a fuckload of railroads.
I think the Americans would actually.
That too. 1869 a porn parody. If you're wondering how animals work, they cost anywhere between 2 to 3 shillings today. So, like 50 cents. Animals are limited on terrain. There's also foot, which can get pretty grueling. Some hazards include diseases, mountains, just other things. There's also water travel because that's mostly faster, but that leads to your rough rides in the ocean and horrible fish monsters that eat you and rapids. You know, your standard pulp. Oh no, we're about to go down the cataracts of the Nile.
Or we'll face the dreaded Candiru.
Oh no. Imagine like an alien Candiru that just like crawls into your belly button.
Oh no, I was thinking this would be well like a Candiru, except it ends up turning into one of those those parasites that they pull out of people that are like essentially like 5 times as long as the person's body.
Oh, you're talking about it's a specific worm native to Africa. I thought you were gonna go with the you're gonna go with like the isopod that mimics a fish's tongue, only it mimics the downstairs.
No, I'm thinking more
There's
of
also a
no,
parasite
it's
that
an a it
basically gelds a crab and turns them into imitation female crabs.
no, I was thinking more of essentially it's it's a Candiru that the way to remove it would be kidney stone Laffy Taffy.
Oh, that's the devil. Ew. Pain. Anyway, that's awful. Didn't need to think about that. Aerial travel. There's the commercial Zeppelin. Zeppelins are very popular. They're relatively expensive. Screw galleys and kites are cheaper, but they're less
Oh,
fun to ride on.
this is before the Zeppelin industry gets deregulated.
Well, I mean, to give you an idea, the reason why the Hindenburg used hydrogen was they just didn't have access to helium. Nazi Germany just didn't have helium-3.
Oh no, I was making a joke on the deregulation of
Wait,
the
no,
airplane
helium-3 is
industry.
Gundam. Wow, I had a brain fart. No, it's just they didn't have access to helium. Yeah, yeah, you didn't know? Zeppelins are nuclear powered now. They gotta use helium-3 for their Minovsky reactors.
You could probably use the term Minovsky reactor, and it would
I'm just
people would buy it
envisioning
in a setting.
I'm just fucking envisioning I'm just envisioning Char Aznavour from the original Gundam run, dressed as like an actual, like just modify his uniform to look even more like a 19th century English explorer. And he's like, "You can't catch me. I'm 3 times faster." And he's flying in the slowest fuck red Zeppelin.
Actually, how would a steampunk Gundam look like?
It looked like a mechanical man and filled with clockworks. Oh god, I'm just in the mental image of Char in a red Zeppelin. Oh man, that's hilarious. They'd probably be using aeroplanes and stuff instead.
Oh yeah, no,
He'd
yeah,
be like he'd be basically like Baron Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron.
the Red Baron versus Char Aznavour.
I'd have to go with von Richthofen. Oh, actually no, Char can see the future, so he wins.
Uh,
New types are
now
bullshit.
what now what about the World War I flying ace? Snoopy.
Snoopy, he might lose against Snoopy, but that's just because Snoopy's that fucking good.
And also, if you think about it, it's a doghouse versus either a mech or a plane. Smaller target.
Yeah, Snoopy I think would win in that fight. If you're wondering hazards, if you're going around in the air, storms are very common. There's also sky pirates and bat monsters. You have to hit them with you have to hit them with your revolver that looks like a shoe. I
That's
love
I
the
mean,
flight attendant who's just looking annoyed.
because these are actual passengers.
He's just it's not them actually attacking the ship. It's just he's that fucking racist.
No, it's my turn at the Mile High Club. Damn it!
They also mention what's called altered encounters. They're extremely easy to come up with. So
Perhaps the players have their mouths off so much that twice the normal number of bandits show up.
this is like if
Um,
you're running an adventure and like let's say your party's being an asshole or they were smart or they're about to die and you're trying to balance the difficulty rating. You can tweak it as you do. Also, by the way, this bit of art here is, I believe, a nod to Star Trek, the original Star Trek show, because one of the episodes I very clearly remember used an old dungeon set from an earlier medieval piece, and behind it was stock footage of a cat. It was just a large-sized black house cat that they made look even bigger. Because budgets are magical. You can also just make up encounters on the spot. There's also random encounters, which that can be a thing. Uh, Weather is something that can be a random encounter, by the way, and that can actually cause some effects depending on the type of weather you get.
They say financing an expedition.
Oh yeah, exploration. Remember, this is the age of imperialism, so exploring is very important. So you need rich people to fund you, and very common ones include the government itself, because the government does usually have an interest in certain economic things. Like, I'd say we'd need to make sure that we can monopolize our hands on the liftwood. We need to make sure that we can maximize the liftwood, so we need to chart out further expeditions to the plateaus of Mars, and that could be an example. The Royal Geographic Society is also very commonly, because their whole thing is to see what's there, so those
Uh,
ones usually do quite a bit. Then you just have random rich people who are like, I want to see, I want you to hunt me a Martian elephant so that I could have it in a zoo.
or the Zionist Congress financing an expedition to find the long lost Deep One Jews. We can settle on Mars.
No, no, no. What happens is that the Earth governments are like, we're just going to, like, rather than just not give them Palestine slash Israel, let's just exile them all to Mars.
Well, I mean, they I forget Herzl, when he was building up the Zionist movement, he was shopping around places. He was thinking, I believe Zimbabwe.
Why
Uh,
Zimbabwe when
uh,
you can go to Mars in this timeline?
yeah, but and basically he would have taken anything.
Uh, oh, here's a question: is it kosher to eat a dinosaur?
I'm gonna look up the rules for kosher.
Let's
Uh,
say you run into a brontosaurus, and you shoot it with your elephant gun with the help of Mbubu. Is it
so I'm gonna
kosher
go
to
through the.
eat the brontosaurus?
Is it a mammal?
All reptiles are they're all reptiles,
Are they
but they are
birds
closely
then?
related to birds.
Okay, there is so I'm going Wikipedia here. Um,
Okay, you
blood
shoot you
must
shoot
never
you
be
shoot a
cons.
T-Rex, which is closely related to a bird.
Okay, so well, it has to be slaughtered in a specific way. Um, and let's see. Um, consumption of flesh of any animals such as pork, frogs, shellfish forbidden except for locusts. Locusts are kosher. Um,
Yeah, you can eat the bugs.
well, no, no, just the locust. So, let's see. Meat products are those that contain kosher meat: beef, lamb, venison, chicken, goose, duck, turkey, um, or derivatives of animals. So I think yes. I
You
mean, they're not
probably you
hooved.
probably couldn't eat a brontosaurus, but you can legally hunt and kill a T-Rex with the aid of Mbubu.
Why would we not be able to kill a brontosaurus or eat
Because
one?
it's more of a reptile. It's more of a reptile than a bird.
I mean, I don't know if there's a prohibition on a reptile. Um, you said, is it a, well, these aren't birds of prey. They're, no reptiles. Shit. I guess the ones
I
that are
know in
more,
this case the Catholic Church would just not give a shit and allow you to eat them during Lent.
um, so I assume the meat would not be that tasty.
You'd be surprised. It'll probably taste like chicken.
I mean, if the, I'm assuming, okay, if it's closer to a, um, bird, then I'd say like a reptile, possibly.
So theropods
But I mean,
fine, quadrupeds no.
Uh,
You could eat a
we have to ask Rabbi.
velociraptor, but probably
We
you couldn't eat a.
we're gonna have to ask. We're gonna have to have. So we asked the rabbi about this, and also I remember a few. So we ended up talking about werewolves possibly being Jewish. Yeah, there's apparently a reference in Genesis about I guess a guy maybe having like wolf attributes or acting like a wolf or something like that. It could be theorized as a Jewish werewolf.
So yes, you can legally be a Jewish werewolf. We have learned this. This is key. This is critical information. Just like Herzl going to Mars to shoot dinosaurs with Umbubu to settle the new Israel on Olympus Mons. You just got to kick out the native Martians first. It'll be fine. You can also become lost. That's a thing that you got to worry about with expeditions, especially since you're uncharted. Here is a spacecraft. So space travel, how does this work? So the aether is a substance that fills all of space, even the volume also filled by ordinary matter. Ether is the medium through a variety of forces are transmitted through space, just as air is a medium through which sound travels. A vacuum insulates against heat or cold because there's no way for them to jump across. Light and gravity can be felt because of aether. Without the aether, gravity would be unable to maintain the attraction of bodies. So they go into details about traveling through the aether. Can we get a rabbi in once a year to answer these questions as a video? That would be fucking hilarious. That would be amazing. We'd have to compile questions like this over time, though.
See, every single art. This is can a Jew exist in this fantasy RPG?
Well, I mean that's one of them, but it's like can there be Jewish werewolves, and is it kosher if they, I don't know, do this? Also,
Okay,
they go
so
into detail about aether theory, which actually was very commonly thought of until as late as the very late 19th century.
I should think of another one. What would be kosher to eat an orc?
I'd assume most rabbis would reject it because of the sapience argument.
Uh, would you consider an orc from 40K to be actually sapient?
I mean, they can talk, can't they? They can make
I mean,
decisions even if they're dumb as dog shit, right?
yeah,
Like they're technically sapient, they're just really marginal. I think they would
maybe.
reject it primarily just because of the fact that they can talk and do things.
What about a squig then?
I don't think
Add
fungi
this
are
to
banned.
yeah, add this to the list then. Oh,
Well, they wouldn't eat parrots anyway, just because they're technically. I just don't think they would eat parrots.
um, I'm back.
Crow are unclean animals, so they wouldn't be able to eat them.
Is it a bird of prey?
Crows are not birds of prey, but they're often considered carrion birds, which also are unclean. So no, that I know that would not count. Parrots, maybe, maybe parrots are kosher. I don't know.
Is it a bird of prey?
No, they parrots have those beaks primarily to eat nuts.
And yes, I think it would be.
You are legally allowed to eat parrots.
Um, yes, scavengers are not allowed. So,
So crows, no.
crows no, parrots yes.
Also, the etheric ocean. They go into details about this, navigating through the aether. You have to actually understand the aether and its disturbances because it's, kind of like a fluid. The solar system. They go into details
Yep.
about each of the planets. Mercury, one side is constantly locked towards the sun and is a boiling desert. The other hemisphere is a frozen. It's basically frostburn. There's the twilight zone of Mercury, which is a band of temperate climate which encircles the whole planet. In this twilight zone, there are two extremes: perpetual dusk and perpetual dawn, day, and heat. The sun sets eternally in the twilight zone, yet never completely moves below the horizon. It's spanned about 100 miles. There's a river that goes its way around the planet. Deep river valleys, very jungle-like, very Cambrian. Then there's Venus, which beneath its clouds, it's a swamp world that is continuous rainfall and withering heat. Because traditionally, because of its cloud cover, Venus was often depicted in sci-fi as a jungle world. In fact, actually, it wasn't until we realized it was a burning nightmare planet that we realized, because it wasn't until I think the 50s and 60s. But yeah, Venus is a swamp planet. There's a lot of dinosaurs on it.
I like the
Earth,
description for the
Earth is
Earth.
Earth.
Is the standard against which all other worlds are judged. There's just a slight arrogance in it.
I think it's rather fitting that it's like that. And as for Mars, it's an arid planet, very much based on Edgar Rice Burroughs' take on Barsoom. Ancient civilizations tried to eke out the land. It's very harsh. It's a dying world. Also, people wonder why Martians' gravity is so close to Venus and Earth's, but still lighter. And they went with the idea that Mars in this timeline is much denser. They also include Luna, which Luna has no surface atmosphere and no surface water, which makes it inhospitable to visitors and difficult to explore.
But there
However,
are inhabitants in the moon,
yeah, Moon's hollow, baby.
or at least evidence. Oh,
There's
yep.
fungal
No, they say it.
creatures.
Fungi, animals.
hmm
And they asked, oh, yeah, they do bring up Vulcan.
Uh, the name of the hypothetical planet between Jupiter and Mars was never called Vulcan. It was never
Well,
called Vulcan. It had a different name. But
they explain it as
yeah. Oh, more than 300 million years ago, the world exploded as a natural consequence of its age. Most chunks are simply iron or rock or sandstone, but there are surface pieces which contain evidence of a long-lost extinct race. So, remember that Star Wars adventure we covered with the ruins of Alderaan as an asteroid field, which include, like, structures? That's basically Vulcan, which I think is kind of cool.
impossible, but cool.
As for travel between planets, it's hard, but it's doable. Aether flyers do it all the time. The distances between planets make it take quite a while. It takes months to get across, but it is worth. But as long as you can chart the courses and do the things right, you're fine. Uh,
It basically works as an ocean.
it's basically long provision oceans. There's battery powers. The length takes a long fucking time. Uh, Going from Venus to Mars usually takes like 2 months. It's basically long form ocean travel. Uh, Treat it as you're sailing. There's also a bunch of hazards in space. The two biggest hazards are turbulence from the aether, and then there's asteroid problems. I'm sad there's no space whales, but we have to just accept that there are no space whales.
Well, do be careful. We could get actual whales where we get baloney space whales.
Filoni didn't even come up with them. He stole them from fucking Treasure Planet. Like, he literally stole the design from Treasure Planet. I think if you actually compare the space whales from Treasure Planet, they look the fucking same. So
Let me look
here
it
they
up.
are looking at something. He's looking at something else, but we'll move on to that. So anyway, Luna. So the moon is the Earth's nearest neighbor, and there's initially no interest in it because the surface is a barren shithole. So it seems pretty boring.
And the first guy to visit it was,
A German.
I think, a German and an Italian.
And they were just looking for cheap iron. They didn't really find anything interesting. They did find out that the moon had moonquakes.
And there's this thing called the glow. Rumors about hidden treasures, great wealth and diamonds, and
And
the
Moonman.
existence of the Selenites, or the Moonmen. Oh god, I hope their commercials are family friendly.
Of course they are family friendly, you fucking idiot. Yeah, yeah, completely fucking fine for the family. You're going with the mascot. I'm going with the Aqua Teen Hunger Force version.
Oh,
We are
uh,
superior in every way.
oh, those are Moonanites.
Close enough.
So the glow is a particular event, and they claim that if one's in the right position, a faint glow can be seen on a part of the far side. It's really a pinprick as seen with the unaided eye, but telescope observers claim the glow area can be anything up to a mile across, greenish white light that has never been scientifically examined. Rumor has it the Russians have more information about the glow, but frankly, they aren't talking, so they made it up.
So they
If it,
also mentioned that there is an adventure for it. I think I'm going to skip past this one. Basically, it's an adventure to the moon, and I don't want to spoil it for you. I hope you don't mind. Let's see. Is this
yeah, it
Oh, here we
is.
go. There's Mars. So
I think these are all then adventures.
I'm just get we're
But
going to go a little briefly into it. I'm not going to show the whole thing. I just want to show like little details about it. So Mars, out of all the planets, this is the one, and then they go into this. Basically, ever since telescopes were first invented that were capable of looking at good detail on planets, there were weird little crisscrossing patterns discovered on Mars, and they were often thought to be canals. So, as a result, it was very commonly thought initially that Mars might have actually hosted civilization similar to us. But it's not. And they go into details about a Martian adventure. Basically, Mars is very much like Barsoom, but different. The canals of Mars, they go into detail about a lot of Mars, but I don't really want to show it because, again, this is for the referee, and this is for you.
well, they do bring up the Empire, Selden's Empire.
Oh yeah, there's a large empire over there. There's also a bunch of treasures of Mars, like Liftwood, which is very important. There's
So
Bhutan
sort of here's
spice, which, if you're wondering, spice. It's called Bhutan spice. It's basically Star Wars spice. It's
which
an edible, but it's also a narcotic.
that Dune spice.
Similar.
It's a drug.
There's also gum, which is like super gum. They also mentioned the fire jewels of Moab, which I kind of like. That's a slight nod actually to Barsoom, if you're wondering why.
But
Traditionally, a lot of harnesses on Mars actually had gems on them, and those gems reflected all 9 colors of light.
wait, what's the difference between gum and super gum?
Oh, gum, I just call it gum. To differentiate it from normal gum, gum or super gum doesn't freeze and it doesn't lose its elasticity easily. Basically, it's super rubber. Oh, and also some colonizations on some of the colonies on Mars include from Russia, Great Britain, France, Germany. The U.S. actually did not have any particular interest, but the U.S. Do they go into this? They have no colonial interest to speak of, although they intend to regard Central and South America as some of theirs. They're everywhere. Basically, the Americans are trying to press for an open door policy on Mars.
I mean, that honestly that fits.
As for Japan, they're tentatively claiming areas of Mars.
Because U.S. colonization kind of, like, well, there was, well, the creation of what would become the states. There's
We
Hawaii,
we
which
attempted the Philippines, but basically we realized running a colony is kind of a pain in the ass, so we fucking stopped. Also, the also our citizens legitimately threw massive protests about it.
it didn't help that the war was started over an actual lie.
Yeah. The Skrill Riders of Mars. These are all the societies, by the way, because Mars has a bunch of societies and peoples, which goes into details. There's also the High Martians, which are like
Okay.
bat people. I kind of like how they go into details on like the all the Martian types. I really like that. Oh, I love this so much. It takes inspiration from
Right.
Barsoom, but it does things its own way. Hey, Step Tiger, which is basically the Banth.
Games. Much of male society is built around two games. A succession game between Skylord and Worthy Adversary, and sports games. Uh, Games of different colors with a giant dome made of a wooden frame. Each color is supported by a different elder who uses influence and what wealth he has to further his team. Two riders, two merchants on foot. Object of the game is to secure a token placed in the center of the field at the start of the game and hold it among team members until a sand timer runs out.
It's
You know,
basically keep away. It's also a slight nod
eh,
to, if you're wondering, there is a John Carter book called The Chessmen of Mars. Basically, there was a tyrannical Martian warlord who was very obsessed with the Martian version of chess, to the point where every year he sent slaves to basically die in blood sports just to amuse himself.
it's fun. The way it's presented makes it sound very unique and alien, and
It does,
you
doesn't
know,
it?
like it comes from a different society, unlike Coyote and Crow, which is literally just it's soccer.
Yeah, you like that? There's a reason why I wanted to show off Space 1889. I never got into full detail on Mars, but the concept was interesting, and I read bits of it, particularly the remake. I knew this was a really good book to just show off to people.
Martians themselves. So the High Martians have
They're the most savage of
uh,
the lot. They look like bats.
they have three fingers, three toes. Um,
Well, Martians in general have three fingers and toes. They basically had three-toed creatures. In terms of their government, they're
they have
sky leaders.
languages. It's a it's a feudal society, I assume.
Yep. The Crags are an example of them. They're very savage, basically.
They dress in loincloth, wears leather harnesses, and there are metal and animal
Again, a nod to
bone sort
Barsoom.
of.
It's a nod to Barsoom. A lot of it is based on because if you're doing an adventure pulp, you're gonna turn to Edgar Rice Burroughs' work.
And the oh, you can actually make a hill Martian.
Oh yeah, you can play them. Basically, you're the native advisor. You could also be the equivalent of a British sepoy, where you're part of the colonial army.
Then there's the canal Martians, which are
The most
they look
civilized
like
of the
elves.
lot, essentially.
They just look like elves.
They're also relatively decadent. One word. All right, what's the word, Dark Sun? By the way, if you're wondering, canal Martians tend to operate on city-state logic. Which, if you're wondering, again, you're kind of. Oh God, I keep using Barsoom as a comparison. The canal
I mean,
Martians
what
are very similar to your red Martians, while the high Martians are very similar to your green Martians.
Dark Sun's one word is breedable. Yes or no?
I got no goddamn comment, but you can take a look at both of them and make your decision.
I mean, they're humanoid. However, remember Stalin tried to interbreed uh, humans and gorillas, and that did not work out.
So, I don't know. It's up to you. I'm
I
gonna
mean,
just say
if
it's
you
up
do
to
make them
you.
interbreedable, that brings up a common ancestor issue. Uh,
I'm not even thinking about it. I'm just moving on because please. Oh, I like this terrifying animal, and it just looks like a fucking octorok.
Which one?
The Noe
Oh,
Shoshu.
the one that's holding on to the woman?
Yeah, look at it. I like how it looks like it's smoking a cigarette too. Wait, is this thing intelligent or no?
Um,
Nah, it's not. I was just making a shit post.
prehistoric. They have fucking dragons.
Of course they
The
do.
fuck?
What,
No,
you didn't
it,
expect
it's a
dragons?
fucking it's a fucking Chinese dragon.
Yeah, you like it?
How?
You like it?
I do. But how? Oh, see, the cult of the worm. Uh, might be the followers of decay or the worshippers of Oh, so it's an Urgle.
The cult of the worm is a rather nihilistic religion given to sacrifices, murder, terrorism, and debauchery. No, this is based on like this is like their version of the Thuggee cult.
I know, but worshippers of rot and corruption.
The deities who receive the sacrifices and adulations are known as the living old ones, immortal beings whose great age and experiences have shown them the futility and wickedness of life. Oh no, no, no! You're saying Nurgle? No, this is the cult of Isus. This is the cult of Isus from the fucking or Isis. This is the cult of Isis from Barsoom.
Oh. Oh, and anarchists.
Oh yeah, there's
Anarchists
the
were
ground cleansers of society. They're anti-human movements. They're very popular because of the with the Canal Martians. And yes, anarchism has grown more and more popular in Mars.
they say the more militant anarchists such as Mikhail Bakunin were opposed to any organization whatsoever, even anarchist organizations, as he apparently bombed a meeting, an anarchist meeting, for this reason.
Last I checked, I don't think Bakunin was that nuts, but this might have changed.
I mean, that's dedication.
I mean, he may have been that nuts. I'd have to actually look back on him, but I don't recall him being that crazy.
Anarchist activity on Mars consists of leaflets, random bombings of public places and government offices, and assassinations of government officials, the wealthy and titled. Again, the higher the better.
There's also Fenians, which are another type of socialism.
They're Irish.
They're Irish rebels on Mars. You like that? The Irish
Hmm?
rebels on Mars supporting the colonial revolts. Also, here's a
Eh,
bit of Venus. So, Venus is a jungle world. Um, to give you an idea, Venus was it was named that because it was thought to be a beautiful world because of its high reflectivity, its brightness actually, its luminosity. In Judaic, in not Judaic, but like in the Semitic world, it was often commonly called the son of El because it was just like it was also known as the morning star, hence why one of the titles for the devil is Lucifer,
Morning, sir.
mainly because he was commonly also called the son of El, tied himself to Venus traditionally in lore.
Hmm.
Lucifer, that's why. Because if you're gonna run into other millenarian, because I think it was another millenarian Jewish cult that the early Christians ran into.
I mean that. I mean, at that point, yeah, all
Basically,
they all thought it was the end
anytime
times.
you kicked a rock, there was like five of them.
I mean, that's what the Dead Sea Scrolls are based on.
But yeah, Venus was a mystery. For a long time, even into the 20th century, we thought maybe it was actually a relatively habitable world. You know, hotter, but pause. And then, oh dear baby Jesus, the thermal readings are saying this place is so fucking hot it'll melt lead. And then there was some copium saying, well, maybe the mountains are cool enough to maybe tolerate like no, no, it's like 5,000 gajillion degrees. Venus is easily the hottest planet in the solar system. It actually outdoes Mercury because it retains all that heat. On top of that, Venus actually has pressures that make the deep sea look kind. Something like 80 times our atmosphere in terms of density. It is a nightmare world. But
All you have to do is just lower the atmosphere, and it's It's breathable.
Yes and no. There's not really oxygen, but there is a lot of carbon dioxide.
We just remove the we just remove the two carbons.
It is easier to terraform though than Mars will be because that's a nuclear desert with no ability to hold atmosphere. In case you're wondering, Venus in this setting is a jungle world, as mentioned. There's a variety of plants that are very useful for dye works and chemicals. In fact, that's probably where antibiotics came from, is Venus. There's also a bunch of dinosaurs.
And the lizard men.
Hey, don't you want lizardmen?
Uh, I mean, as long as they're not the ones worshipping Gieg or the great old one, or no, not the great old ones, just the old ones.
So in terms of
So as
weather,
long as they don't, as long as they don't have a giant frog as their leader, I'm good.
to give you an idea, temperatures in Venus range from around the mid 90s to on average about 110 to 130 degrees. It's pretty nasty.
Uh,
It also
in
constantly rains.
in in their setting or in real life,
Oh, in real life, it's hot enough to melt lead.
you're saying is we need to be cast in steel.
There are colonies on Venus just because it's actually kind of important. The Italians actually dabbled on colonizing Venus. It's one of their few relative successes, by the way. Oh, look, here's a Venusian. Look at that lizard fuck hanging out with that German in the pickle haub.
Oh God, I'm just yeah, they're gonna have a Nazi base on Venus, aren't they?
Probably, and it's gonna be staffed by lizard people. Squirrel killer, don't turn Venus into a brothel planet. Make it, don't do it.
No, no, no. That's for eclipse phase.
They go into the ice pal. Here's what the lizardmen look like. I like that they're quadrupedal pedal turtle people.
They shed their skin.
That's neat. I actually really like this.
Lizardmen's name for humans, Bolu um Omenima, pale as a dead fish.
I like that. They also are
That
very strongly smell based. Uh, the lizardmen not having the use of fire remain in a stone age. It also doesn't help that iron and steel have a bad habit of rusting completely in the hands of lizardmen. It's mostly just because of the fact that Venus is so rainy. They do like metal though. They really love metal. They in particular love brass, bronze, any non-corrosive metal is some of their favorite. They love the color. They also love glass. They love shinies. Here's some dinosaurs.
easiest sore.
hmm There's also giant man-eating turtles and man-eating plants. Ichthyosaurs in the deeper oceans. There's also plesiosaurs, pterosaurs. There's a lot of shit. I actually there's no adventure module because they were still working on Venus and basically they already gave you a couple on Mars and in Mercury, so they were like, well, fuck it.
I think that's it then.
That's basically it. It just shows you how some of their ships are designed just to give you an idea in their pricing. So if you ever want to
We
actually make a ship, here's some suggestions on how to do it and how their cards work. So
think
with
they have some.
that, hmm?
Oh, they do have a map in the back. Um,
Do they have a map? What's
it,
it on? Oh, they also have a
no,
quick cheat
like
guide, by the way, for combat tables.
like for combat.
Yeah, little
It's in
cheap
that hex
combat
format.
tables. Here you go. This is
And
basically for the GM to scribble on if you need it. And there's the small
and
scale
something
version.
and something that I've never seen before. There was a page.
Oh, I
I think
love that
it's
you can customize your
216.
faces. Look at this.
Yes, I have never seen this in an RPG before.
I like it.
I guarantee you they mean you to print this out.
They are. Like it's legitimately for your faces.
Yeah, that is something that I've never seen before.
I love it. There's also some rules expansions from the referee screen, which they just paired in the book near the end. And here is the map of Venus. Because they showed Mars, they have to show Venus. Here it is. Note that unlike Mars, there's no ice caps. And with that, we are at the end of the book. So, what did you think?
Interesting. I think it's probably up the time, but I would have liked to have a more of an entrance into the setting. Feels like they focus more on, well, this is Victorian age, and then here's all the technology and all that, and here's the planets, and
Well, I mean,
that's it.
it's the core rule book. If you want, there's a bunch of other ones, such as in order: the Adventure Hook, the Strange Land, the Venus Source Book, the Mercury Source Book, City at the Center of the Earth, because there's Pellucidar as well. There's also just a variety of Martian things like the Beastmen of Mars, Caravans of Mars, Step Lords of Mars, the Cloud Captains, Tales from the Ether, Canal Priests of Mars, Transactions of the Royal Martian Geographical Society, which were from magazines. There's a Liftwood conspiracy. There's a bunch of shit. So I think the idea was they wanted a functional RPG first, and then adventures and more lore details later.
Uh,
So, yeah, what do you think of this take on the Adventure Pulp series?
I do like it though. I think what to me is interesting is the fact that it does have this real world colonization, um, and sort of the use of real world weapons and technology along with the fantastic.
Yeah, and also I will say they actually made the aliens have an alien mindset. In particular, they did a really good job with the Venusians, in my opinion, because they mentioned specifically that they don't rely like their sight's kind of their third element that they rely on. They rely more on, from what I understand, vibrations and smell, which affects how they interact with things. It also describes why they're not particularly enthused with iron and metal crafting in general. Why there's not much of an incentive, just because, well, fire's not needed if they can just digest as they can, and also because it rains all the time. It plays with being goofy without being too goofy. I I will say the couple of flaws are, I think aerial combat would be a pain in the ass because you have to constantly factor in altitude levels. But then again, if you're playing say D&D and you're playing around with flight, you'd have to do the same thing. All in all, I can't quite say I'd say it's a good book, and there's a reason why this book became so popular that they made a bunch of splats. It had its own magazine. It was, and also you got to keep in mind it's kind of unique. It's a kind of unique niche that you don't really see get fulfilled that often. Pathfinder plays around a little bit with it in that one setting with the nuclear crashed spaceship, but it's not really applied anywhere else except arguably in second edition's Spelljammer setting. And even then, and even then, it doesn't quite meet what you're asking for. This is kind of its own vibe. I can kind of easily see why this game was one of the most popular RPGs in its time period. Apparently, it was like number 20 out of 50, which is pretty good. Here's the
Yeah.
next question: Do you think everyone would be interested in doing more of this? Not like for next week, just in general, like doing more space 1889s.
I'd be interested in it. Probably again more of the lore and Personally, for me, if there was more sense of okay,
Probably cover the adventure modules and or the source books then.
yeah, what does the geopolitical scene look like?
They don't really ever go on about Earth. It's traditionally just focused on the interplanetary colonials pissing matches.
Yeah, but like, for instance, South America getting involved in this.
Uh,
I want to
Not
see a
really.
Mexican colony. I want to see a Brazilian colony.
Mexico wouldn't have the ability to organize a colony. To give you an idea, they were too busy just trying to get their shit together on Earth.
So
I
this
could,
is
s-
This is
I
Porfirio Diaz. I think this is midway through his regime,
he's busy. He's still busy building railways up to connect to the U.S. and actually building something approaching an economy, though.
or this is where I guess some of the
I will say you could probably see an attempt by Brazil to set up a colony, although I expect they'd go bankrupt before they could. That could be interesting, like a failed Brazilian colony on like Mars or Venus somewhere.
actually Venus would probably be appropriate.
Like
Um,
they were trying to get access to certain medicines and certain types of plants that they could use for things like improving their rubber ability.
also,
Be-
did they ever go beyond the asteroid belt, like
uh,
Saturn or Jupiter?
Not I don't think initially. That might have changed. There might be books that do, but traditionally, when it comes to these books, they don't really do it. Which is kind of a shame because you can do some interestingly weird stuff with Jupiter and Saturn and beyond.
So that's
Because to give you an idea, Edgar Rice Burroughs, right before he died, did play around with actually having aliens from Jupiter invade Mars. They were known as the Skeleton Men of Jupiter.
I got an idea. They're jellyfish-like floating creatures that are psychic.
Oh, I love
The
it.
jellyfish of Jupiter.
And and that's what they sound like if you can't listen to their mind.
And then of course, the fungi of Yuggoth.
AKA Pluto. Also, Neptune has to be a giant water world.
Hmm?
It has to be like a huge ocean planet. It's like Subnautica.
What's Saturn then?
I don't know. It's up to whoever wants to do it.
It's just a gas giant. Out of all planets in the solar system, it's just the one that is completely unremarkable.
I like how Uranus is interesting.
Oh no, I wait. I gotta. It's a Casablanca. It's a can't or it's a Hong Kong or something like that. It's the red spot is just a port of entry.
Squirrel Killer also would be interested in looking at some setting books. So yeah, we might do more Space 1889. I was just using it as a thing. Um, I will say next week because it was a tie, and I do want to be fair. Quite a bit of you wanted to see it. We will definitely make the absolute fucking fun out of Infinite Worlds GURPS because gotta love my multiverse garbage in the morning. No, actually, it's
No,
specifically I'm going to be making the ever living shit out of. I'm going to be sporking the ever living shit out of its timeline takes.
and for me, it's more because apparently the multidimensional, I guess agency
The
is
Centrum,
one
yeah,
run by the UN,
I love the UN.
and two is managed by the United Nations. I don't know how they operate or how they would be able to operate.
Yes. All I do know is it's going to be a bit of a trash fire. Also, I'm so sorry, Mouse Guard, that you did not even get a single vote because that would have also have been a pretty interesting book, from what I understand. I've never read I've never read Redwall, so a lot of that would be lost on me. But the concept of doing shit like the Rats of Nim always does sound kind of interesting. So on the next on the chopping block will definitely be GURPS Infinite Worlds. Don't feel bad. while while the fraud may have existed, I am at least willing to continue with it. You can get actually a copy of the book. We linked to Drive Through RPG. Uh, the GDW version is still sold as a PDF. As for there's a more modern 2014 reprint by a different game company that does a different system. That's also available on there. I did not link that one, sadly, just because I wanted to link specifically to this book. Feel free to drop by our Discord if you feel like it. And last but not least, like, subscribe, whatever. Have an excellent night, everyone. I am going to commit some interesting imperialistic crimes against Martian kind.
Me too.
And Boo Boo, hand me the elephant gun.
Plasma elephant gun.